Under the soft glow of my parents' dining room chandelier, surrounded by the people I had trusted my entire life, I raised my glass toward my grandfather and said the words that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. "Thank you, Grandpa, for the bicycle. It really helped me get back on my feet after the divorce. I meant it sincerely." The old 10-speed he had supposedly given me 8 months ago had become my lifeline, my daily transportation to work, my small symbol that someone in my family had thought of me during the darkest chapter of my life. But the moment those words left my mouth, something shifted in the room. Grandpa Harold's wine glass stopped mid-air. His warm smile collapsed into confusion, then something closer to alarm. "A bicycle," he repeated slowly. "Sweetheart, what bicycle?" "I gave you a Mercedes Benz." The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. My fork slipped from my fingers and clattered against my plate. Across the table, my sister Lauren knocked over her water glass, the liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like an accusation. She shoved back from the table, muttered something about not feeling well, and fled toward the bathroom, her heels clicking frantically against the hardwood. The door slammed behind her, and I sat frozen, my pulse hammering against my ribs, staring at the faces of my parents and wondering how a simple thank you had just detonated a bomb I never knew existed. I looked at my mother first. Patricia Richardson, 58 years old, perfectly styled hair, pearl earrings, the picture of composed elegance. But her face had gone pale, her hand pressed flat against her chest, as if she were trying to hold something inside from spilling out. My father, Robert, sat rigid in his chair, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching beneath his skin. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them looked at me. Grandpa set down his wine glass carefully, as if afraid any sudden movement might break something beyond repair. "Patricia," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had built a trucking empire from nothing. "Didn't you give Ella the car? I wired you $85,000 8 months ago. $85,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. I had been riding a rusted bicycle through Portland rain for 8 months. I had been eating ramen twice a week to stretch my grocery budget. I had been working overtime just to cover rent on a studio apartment so small I could hear my neighbors sneeze through the walls. Mom opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. "Where is the car?" I whispered. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, thin and fragile. "If Grandpa gave you money for a car for me, where is it?" Dad cleared his throat. "This isn't the time or place, Ella. We can discuss this later as a family." "When is the time?" I demanded. "Where is my car? Where is the $85,000 that was supposed to help me?" Grandpa pulled out his phone, his weathered fingers moving across the screen with surprising speed. "I have the bank transfer right here," he said. "I have the email your mother sent thanking me." His voice had hardened, the confusion giving way to something darker. "Patricia, what exactly is going on?" I stood up from the table, suddenly unable to breathe. The walls of my childhood home felt like they were closing in, the familiar photographs on the walls now looking like evidence of a lie I had been living my entire life. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to understand how the people who raised me could have watched me struggle for 8 months while sitting on a small fortune that was meant to save me. I excused myself and stepped onto the back porch, the October air cutting through my thin sweater. The Portland night was cold and damp, typical for autumn, but I welcomed the chill. It was real. It was honest. Unlike everything that had just happened inside. 8 months ago, my life had fallen apart. My husband Michael had left me for a coworker, cleaning out our joint savings account on his way out the door. I moved back to Portland from Seattle with 2 suitcases and $847 to my name. I found a job at a marketing firm downtown. I rented the cheapest studio apartment I could find, and I told myself I was rebuilding, one day at a time. 3 weeks after I moved back, Mom had shown up at my door with an old bicycle she claimed Dad had found in their garage. She said Grandpa thought I might need it. I had been so touched by the gesture, so moved that someone in my family had remembered my childhood love of cycling. I rode that bicycle to work every single day, rain or shine, telling myself it was temporary, telling myself things would get better. And the whole time, $85,000 was sitting somewhere, designated for a Mercedes Benz with my name on it. I thought about all the family dinners over the past 8 months. The Sunday brunches where I showed up with helmet hair and damp clothes, the holiday gatherings where I parked my bicycle in their garage while everyone else pulled up in real cars. Not once had anyone mentioned a Mercedes. Not once had anyone asked why I was still riding a 10-speed when Grandpa had supposedly given me money for a luxury vehicle. But someone had mentioned a car. At Easter brunch 4 months ago, Lauren had arrived in a brand new silver Mercedes. She had been so proud of it, making sure everyone saw her pull into the driveway. When I asked about it, she said it was from Derek's bonus at work. Her husband, Derek, who hadn't held a steady job in 2 years. At the time, I didn't question it. Why would I? She was my sister. Now, the memory made my stomach turn. I forced myself to go back inside. Grandpa was standing now, a folder clutched in his hand. I didn't know when he had retrieved it, but the sight of actual physical documents made everything feel more real and more terrifying. Mom was crying quietly, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. Dad had his arm around her protectively, a united front against whatever was coming. Lauren still hadn't returned from the bathroom. And Derek, I noticed, had vanished entirely. "I did everything right," Grandpa said, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. He showed me his phone, the bank transfer confirmation filling the screen. $85,000, wired to the Richardson family account, the memo line reading clearly, "For Ella's Mercedes, post-divorce fresh start." This was not a suggestion. This was not a family fund. This was specifically, explicitly for my granddaughter, to buy her a car. In her name. Mom let out a choked sob. "Dad, please, it's not what you think." "Then explain what it is, Patricia. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you took money I sent for Ella and used it for something else entirely." I couldn't stay silent anymore. The anger that had been building inside me finally found its voice. "Where is the money?" I asked, stepping toward my parents. "Where is the $85,000 Grandpa sent for me? And please, please don't lie to me again." Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at the floor. The silence stretched until it became its own answer. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lauren needed it more than you did." The words hit me like a slap. I stood there, processing, trying to make sense of something that made no sense at all. My parents had received a gift specifically designated for me, specifically meant to help me recover from divorce, and they had given it to Lauren instead. While I rode a bicycle in the rain, while I counted pennies for groceries, while I worked 2 jobs some weeks just to keep my head above water. "You're the strong one, Ella," Mom continued, tears streaming down her face now. "You've always been able to handle things on your own." Lauren was drowning. She and Derek were in so much debt they were about to lose everything. We had to help her. We had to. Dad nodded stiffly. It was a family decision. We did what we thought was best for everyone. "Everyone except me," I said. My voice was steady now, cold in a way I didn't recognize. I wasn't included in this family decision. I wasn't even told about Grandpa's gift. You took my money and gave it to Lauren, and never said a word. "We were going to tell you eventually," Mom pleaded. "We just needed time to figure things out." Grandpa slammed his folder down on the dining table, making everyone jump. "Eventually? You were going to tell her eventually? While she's been struggling for 8 months? While she's been riding a bicycle to work like a college student when she should have been driving a Mercedes?" I felt something break inside me. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet snap, like a thread that had been holding everything together finally giving way. I looked at my parents, at the house I grew up in, at the photographs on the walls showing smiling family moments that now felt staged and hollow. "I have to go," I said. "Ella, please." Mom reached for me. Let's talk about this." I stepped back, out of her reach. "I think you've said enough." I walked out the front door, down the driveway, to the car I had borrowed from a coworker because my bicycle had a flat tire. The irony wasn't lost on me. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, hands shaking, trying to breathe. My phone buzzed, a text from Grandpa. "Sweetheart, I couldn't sleep. I've been looking through my records. I found the original email chain with your mother. I found the bank statements. Everything is documented. Come to my house tomorrow morning. I'll show you everything. And Ella, I'm so sorry. I trusted them with your future. I should have given the money directly to you. We're going to fix this." I stared at the message until my vision blurred with tears. Not tears of sadness. Tears of being seen. After 8 months of struggling alone, someone finally believed me. Someone finally understood. I typed back with trembling fingers, "I'll be there at 9. Then I set down the phone, started the borrowed car, and drove toward my tiny apartment through the Portland night. Behind me, I left the house where I grew up, the family I thought I knew, and the version of myself who believed that being strong meant being invisible. Tomorrow I would see the evidence. Tomorrow I would understand the full scope of the betrayal. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight, I let myself imagine what my life should have looked like, the car I should have been driving, the apartment I could have afforded, the fresh start that was stolen from me before I even knew it existed. And somewhere in the darkness between my parents' house and my own, I made a decision. I was done being the daughter who didn't ask questions. I was done being the sister who made sacrifices no one noticed. I was done being strong for everyone except myself. Whatever they had done with my money, whatever lies they had told, I was going to find out the truth. And then I was going to take back everything they stole from me. The drive to Lake Oswego took 25 minutes, but it felt like hours. I had barely slept, maybe 2 hours total, my mind replaying the dinner scene on an endless loop. Grandpa's confused face, Lauren fleeing the table, Mom's tearful confession that they had given my money to my sister because I was strong enough to handle being robbed. The October mist hung low over Portland as I navigated the familiar route, passing landmarks from my childhood that now felt like props in a play I had never understood. I passed the coffee shop where Grandpa used to take me for hot chocolate when I was little. I passed the park where he taught me to ride a bike, back when riding a bike was a joy and not a daily reminder of what had been stolen from me. Every turn I made carried memories, but those memories felt different now, tainted, like photographs that had been secretly altered, and I was only just noticing the changes. My hands gripped the steering wheel of the borrowed car too tightly. The coffee I had poured at home sat untouched in the cup holder, cold now. I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back at me. Dark circles under her eyes, tension in her jaw. The face of someone who had just discovered that trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. Grandpa's neighborhood in Lake Oswego was quiet and affluent, the kind of place where old money lived in comfortable craftsman homes behind manicured lawns. His house sat at the end of Maple Ridge Drive, a classic Pacific Northwest craftsman built in 1942. The cedar shingles had weathered to a beautiful silver gray over the decades. The wide wraparound porch still held the wind chimes Grandma had hung 30 years ago, their gentle music carrying across the morning air. I pulled into the driveway and sat for a moment, gathering courage. Whatever waited inside that house would change everything. There would be no going back to the comfortable ignorance I had lived in for 8 months. Part of me wanted to drive away, to pretend last night had never happened, to keep believing that my family loved me equally. But that part was getting smaller by the minute. The front door opened before I could even reach the porch steps. Grandpa Harold stood in the doorway, dressed in pressed khakis and a flannel shirt despite the early hour. He looked older than he had last night, the weight of betrayal visible in the stoop of his shoulders and the shadows under his eyes. But his gaze was sharp and clear, and when he saw me, something in his expression softened. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice cracking slightly on the word. He pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than usual, and I breathed in the familiar scent of him. Coffee and Old Spice and something like sawdust from the workshop he still puttered around in. For just a moment, I felt like a child again, safe, believed, seen. "Come inside," he murmured against my hair. "We have a lot to discuss." The house looked the same as it always had. The same hardwood floors, the same grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the same photographs lining the walls. Pictures of my father as a boy. Pictures of me and Lauren as children, gap-toothed and grinning. Pictures of Grandma before the cancer took her 5 years ago. I had always loved these walls, this history. Now I wondered how many of these smiling moments had hidden uglier truths. Grandpa led me to the living room, where 2 cups of tea waited on the coffee table. Chamomile, my favorite. He had remembered without asking, but my attention caught on what else lay on that table. A thick manila folder, a laptop open to what looked like an email thread, a yellow legal pad covered in his handwriting. He had been working on this all night. "Sit down, Ella," he said, gesturing to the couch. "I need to show you everything." I sat, my hands folding automatically in my lap. Grandpa settled into the armchair across from me. The same armchair where he used to read me stories when I was small. He picked up the manila folder but didn't open it yet. Instead, he looked at me with an expression I had never seen from him before. Sorrow mixed with fury, held in check by decades of business discipline. "I couldn't sleep last night," he began. "After what happened at dinner, after seeing your face when you realized what they had done, I went through every record I have, every email, every bank statement, every piece of correspondence with your parents over the last year." He opened the folder and pulled out the first document. It was a printed email, dated 8 months ago in February. "This is what I sent to your mother," he said, and began to read aloud. "Patricia, I've been thinking about Ella since hearing about the divorce. I want to help her get back on her feet. I'm wiring $85,000 to the family account. Please use it to purchase a reliable car in Ella's name. Something safe, something that will last. I was thinking a Mercedes Benz, the C-Class perhaps. She deserves something nice after everything she's been through. Let me know when it's done. Love, Dad." The words blurred as my eyes began to sting. Grandpa had wanted me to have something nice. Not just transportation, dignity, a fresh start. He had been thinking about me, worrying about me, trying to help me during the worst period of my life. And my parents had taken that love and redirected it. "Your mother replied the same day," Grandpa continued, pulling out another sheet. He read her words in a flat, controlled voice. "Dad, this is so generous. Ella will be thrilled. Robert and I will handle everything. We'll take her to the dealership next week. Thank you for always taking care of our girls." "She said she would take me to the dealership," I whispered. My voice sounded strange, distant. "She said I would be thrilled. She never took you anywhere, did she?" "No." I shook my head slowly. "She brought me a bicycle 3 weeks later, said it was from you." Grandpa closed his eyes briefly, pain flickering across his weathered face. When he opened them again, they were hard. A bicycle. They took $85,000 meant for a Mercedes and gave you a bicycle. He turned his laptop toward me, showing me the online banking portal. The transaction history glowed on the screen, stark and undeniable. Wire transfer, $85,000, dated February 16th. Recipient, Richardson family account. Memo line, for Ella's Mercedes-Benz, post-divorce fresh start, $85,000. More money than I had ever had in my account at one time. Money that could have changed everything about the past 8 months. I could have had a real apartment instead of that cramped studio. I could have had savings instead of living paycheck to paycheck. I could have had dignity instead of showing up to work soaking wet from riding a bicycle in the rain. 2 weeks after I sent the money, Grandpa said, "I texted your mother asking how the car shopping went." He showed me his phone, scrolling to an old message thread. Her reply was right there in black and white. "All done, Dad. Ella is so happy." She cried when she saw it. "Thank you so much. You made her year." I cried when I saw it, I repeated, a hollow laugh escaping my throat. I cried when I saw a rusty bicycle, Grandpa. Because I thought you remembered I liked riding bikes as a kid. I thought it was sweet, thoughtful. I thought you were driving a Mercedes, he said quietly. Every time I saw you over the past 8 months, I assumed you had parked somewhere nearby. I never thought to ask because why would I? She told me it was done. He removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture I recognized from childhood. He always did that when he was trying to control his emotions. When Grandma died, he had done it constantly. I believed her, he said. I believed my own daughter. For 8 months, I thought you were safe and comfortable in a reliable car, rebuilding your life. I had no idea you were struggling. I reached across the space between us and took his hand. His skin felt papery and cool, the hands of a man approaching 80 who had just discovered that his family was built on lies. This isn't your fault, Grandpa. You trusted them. That's not a crime. He shook his head. But that's not all I found last night, sweetheart. There's more. He slid another document across the table. An email from 4 months ago. A routine check-in, he explained, where he had asked Mom how I was enjoying the car. Her reply made my blood run cold. She loves it, Mom had written. Uses it every day. Best gift you ever gave her, Dad. She's doing so much better now. 4 months ago. Mom had written those words 4 months ago, long after she knew the truth. Long after she had given my car to Lauren, long after she had watched me struggle and decided that lying was easier than confessing. She had multiple chances to make it right, multiple opportunities to tell the truth, and she had chosen to deceive Grandpa again and again. She looked me in the eye for 8 months, I said, my voice trembling with anger I could barely contain. She watched me show up to family dinners with wet hair from the rain. She never said a word. She thanked you for me. She said I cried. Grandpa's expression had shifted from grief to something harder. Determination. The same look I had seen in old photographs from when he was building his trucking company, facing down competitors and obstacles with sheer force of will. I need to ask you something, he said slowly. And I need you to think carefully before you answer. Anything. Easter brunch, 4 months ago. Do you remember what car Lauren was driving? The question hit me like a physical blow. The memory surfaced immediately, clear and damning. Lauren pulling into the driveway in a brand new silver Mercedes. Lauren making sure everyone noticed, parking right in front of the house where no one could miss it. Lauren preening as relatives admired the sleek lines and expensive features. She said it was from Derek's bonus, I whispered. Her husband's bonus from work. Derek hasn't had steady employment in 2 years, Grandpa said flatly. He opened a browser tab on his laptop and navigated to the Mercedes-Benz website. He pulled up an image of the C-Class model and turned the screen toward me. Did it look like this? My stomach dropped. The car on the screen was identical to the one Lauren had been driving. Silver, sleek, expensive. The exact car Grandpa had wanted to buy for me. Yes, I breathed. Exactly like that. The picture crystallized with sickening clarity. My parents had received $85,000 designated for my car. They had purchased a Mercedes-Benz. And they had put it in Lauren's name instead of mine. My sister had been driving my car for months, flaunting it at family gatherings while I pedaled through puddles on a rusted bicycle. They didn't just keep the money, I said, the words feeling like broken glass in my throat. They didn't just fail to help me. They bought the car and gave it to Lauren. My car, my gift, my fresh start. They handed it to her like I don't exist. Grandpa stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the garden Grandma had planted so many decades ago. His hands were clasped behind his back, the posture he always adopted when making difficult decisions. This wasn't negligence, he said, his voice low and dangerous. This was theft. Planned, deliberate theft. From my granddaughter, using my money. He turned back to face me, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before, not just anger, resolve. I failed you, Ella. I trusted the wrong people with your future, and I failed you. But I'm going to fix this. Whatever it takes. Lawyers if necessary. Court if it comes to that. Grandpa, I don't want to destroy the family. He crossed back to where I sat and took both my hands in his. They destroyed it the moment they stole from you. You're just finally seeing the wreckage. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The grandfather clock ticked in the hallway. The wind chimes sang softly on the porch. The weight of everything that had been revealed settled around us like dust after an explosion. What do we do now? I finally asked. Grandpa released my hands and began gathering the documents from the coffee table. First, I want you to confront your parents. Get their full story. Make them say out loud what they did and why. And then we decide whether to handle this privately or legally. But Ella, he fixed me with a stern gaze, don't let them gaslight you. Don't let them claim this was a misunderstanding. You have proof, black and white, undeniable. He handed me copies of everything, the emails, the bank statements, the text messages, physical evidence of the betrayal I had only sensed before. Stay calm when you talk to them, he advised. Don't yell. They'll use your anger against you. Ask direct questions. Demand direct answers. And remember, if they try to make you the villain, they are the ones who stole. They are the ones who lied. You are the one who was wronged. I gathered the documents into the folder, my hands no longer shaking. The fear and confusion of last night had transformed into something harder. Clarity, purpose, righteous anger that demanded answers. Call me the moment you leave their house, Grandpa said as he walked me to the door. Whatever happens, I'm on your side, always. I hugged him one more time, breathing in the comfort of his presence. Then I walked to the borrowed car and placed the folder of evidence on the passenger seat. The morning fog had lifted, revealing a rare streak of October sun. I drove toward Beaverton, toward my parents' house, toward the confrontation I had been avoiding my entire life. My mind organized what I knew into a neat, damning list. Grandpa sent $85,000 for a car for me. Mom and Dad took the money. They bought a car and put it in Lauren's name. They lied to Grandpa for 8 months. They gave me a bicycle to cover their tracks. They watched me struggle and said nothing. But beyond the facts, a deeper pain burned in my chest. This wasn't really about the car or the money, it was about the choice. When given $85,000 to help their struggling daughter, they had chosen to give it to Lauren. Because Lauren was fragile and I was strong. Because Lauren needed help and I could handle it. Because I had spent 30 years being the daughter who never asked for anything, and they had decided that meant I didn't deserve anything. As I turned onto my parents' street, I saw Dad's truck in the driveway, Mom's sedan beside it, and parked directly in front of the house, gleaming in the morning light like a taunt, was a silver Mercedes Benz. Lauren was here. Of course she was. Probably strategizing with Mom and Dad all night, probably figuring out how to make me look like the unreasonable one. I parked behind the Mercedes and sat for a moment, staring at the car through my windshield. The car I was supposed to be driving. The car that was bought with my money, my gift, my grandfather's love. I reached out and touched the evidence folder beside me. Then I opened my door, stepped out, and walked toward my parents' house. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Lauren told us you might come by. Let's all talk calmly, okay? There's more to this than you know. I didn't reply. I just kept walking, past the Mercedes, trailing my fingers along its cold, smooth hood as I went. Then I climbed the porch steps and knocked on the door of my childhood home, ready to finally demand the truth. The door opened before my knuckles left the wood. Mom stood in the doorway, her eyes puffy from crying, but her chin lifted in that familiar posture of composed denial. She was wearing a pink cardigan and pearl earrings, her hair perfectly styled even in crisis. The armor of normalcy, as if looking put together, could somehow undo the chaos of what she had done. "Ella, sweetheart," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "Come in. Let's talk like a family." The smell hit me the moment I crossed the threshold. cinnamon rolls baking in the kitchen. Mom's go-to peacemaking tactic since I was a child. Every fight with Lauren, every bad grade, every disappointment had been smoothed over with warm pastry and the unspoken message that whatever was wrong could be fixed with enough sugar. I had fallen for it countless times over the years. Today, the manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. The living room tableau was exactly what I expected. Dad sat in his recliner, arms crossed over his chest, jaw clenched so tight I could see the tension radiating through his entire body. Lauren was curled up on the love seat, knees pulled to her chest, a tissue clutched in her hand like a prop. Derek was noticeably absent. He had apparently fled the scene rather than face whatever was coming. 3 against 1. Just like it had always been, really. The family united against the daughter who dared to ask uncomfortable questions. I didn't sit in the chair Mom gestured toward. Instead, I chose the seat nearest the door, positioning myself for a quick exit if needed. The folder of evidence rested on my lap like a shield. I could feel its weight, the paper edges pressing against my palms. Proof. Undeniable, documented proof of everything they had done. "Before you say anything," Mom began, settling onto the arm of the love seat near Lauren, "we want you to know we love you. This whole situation has been blown out of proportion. Your grandfather doesn't understand the full picture." Dad nodded stiffly. "What your mother is trying to say is that we made a family decision. Sometimes those decisions are complicated. You weren't in a good headspace back then, with the divorce and the move. We were trying to protect you." Lauren spoke through her tears, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. "I'm so sorry, Ella. I never wanted you to find out this way. You have to understand, Derek and I were about to lose everything. I was so scared, I didn't know what else to do." I observed them carefully as they delivered their lines. Because that's exactly what they were. Lines, rehearsed talking points, too smooth and coordinated to be spontaneous. Mom led, Dad supported, Lauren cried. The classic Richardson family formation. The same dynamic that had been suffocating me for 30 years, only now I could finally see it clearly. I didn't respond to any of their excuses. Instead, I simply opened the folder and pulled out the first document. I placed it on the coffee table between us, turning it so they could read the words printed in black and white. "Let's start with this," I said quietly. Mom's face went pale when she recognized it. The email from Grandpa, dated 8 months ago. And beneath it, her own reply. "Ella will be thrilled. We'll take her to the dealership next week. This is Grandpa's email from February," I explained, keeping my voice calm and steady, just as Grandpa had advised. $85,000. For my car. "And this is your response, Mom. You said you would take me to a dealership." "Did you?" "Ella, you have to understand the context," Mom started, her hands twisting in her lap. "You had just gotten divorced. You were fragile. We didn't want to overwhelm you with such a big gift. We thought it would be better to wait until you were more stable." "So you waited," I said. "For 8 months. And in that time, what happened to the money?" Silence stretched across the room. Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at the floor. Lauren dabbed at her eyes with her tissue. "What happened to the $85,000 that was meant for me?" I repeated. Dad cleared his throat. "The money went toward a car, just like your grandfather wanted." We followed his wishes. I reached into the folder and pulled out the third document, the one I had obtained from the DMV first thing this morning. I set it on the table next to Grandpa's email. "Whose name is on the registration?" I asked. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's mouth opened and closed. Lauren's crying stopped abruptly, her eyes widening with something that looked like fear. Dad's jaw worked, but no words came out. I tapped the document with my finger. "This is the vehicle registration for a Mercedes-Benz C-Class. Purchased February 23rd of this year, 1 week after Grandpa wired the money. The registered owner is Lauren Michelle Richardson Hartley." My voice hardened. "My name isn't on this. Lauren's name is." The room shifted. I could feel the power dynamic changing, the carefully constructed narrative crumbling under the weight of evidence they couldn't deny. You didn't delay my gift, I said, each word precise and deliberate. You gave it to someone else. Mom's composure finally cracked. The tears that had been threatening spilled over, and words tumbled out of her in a desperate torrent. Lauren and Derek were in crisis, she cried. They had credit card debt up to their eyeballs. Collectors were calling constantly. They were about to lose their apartment. You were doing fine, Ella. You had a job, an apartment. You were handling everything. Lauren was falling apart. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. We had to make a choice, and we chose to help the child who needed it most. Dad nodded vigorously, backing her up. It was supposed to be temporary. We figured we'd sort things out later, maybe find a way to help you when everything settled down. Lauren was drowning. You were swimming. Lauren's plea joined the chorus. I'm so sorry, Ella, I know it was wrong, but you don't understand what it's like to be me. Everything is so easy for you. You just handle things. I've never been strong like you. I've never been able to push through the way you do. When Mom and Dad offered to help, I was desperate. I said yes. I shouldn't have. I absorbed the assault of excuses, letting their words wash over me without interrupting. When they finally fell silent, I spoke quietly. You chose Lauren. It wasn't a question, just a statement of fact. That's not, Mom started. You had $85,000 designated for me, and you chose Lauren. Mom was crying openly now. Ella, you've always been the strong one. There it was. The phrase I had heard my entire life, weaponized against me one final time. You've always been so capable, Mom continued, so independent. Lauren needs us. You never have. Something cold and hard crystallized inside my chest. Every time I hadn't asked for help was now being used against me. Every time I had powered through hardship on my own was proof that I didn't need them. My strength had become their justification for neglect. I stood up. I couldn't sit any longer, couldn't keep still while they explained why I deserved to be abandoned. I walked to the window and looked out at the silver Mercedes parked on the street. My Mercedes. Lauren's Mercedes. The car that should have been mine. Then I turned back to face them. Let me tell you about the last 8 months, I said, my voice rising, since you seem to think I was doing fine. I moved into a 400-square-foot studio apartment because that's all I could afford after the divorce. Michael emptied our savings. I started over with nothing. I took a step closer, my words coming faster now. I biked to work every single day. Rain, wind, it didn't matter. I couldn't afford a car. I skipped meals to make rent. I declined invitations because I couldn't afford a glass of wine. I worked overtime, weekends, holidays, anything to stay afloat. My voice broke, but I pushed through. And you watched, all of you. You saw me show up to family dinners with helmet hair and wet clothes. You saw me bike home in the dark. And not one of you said, "Hey, Ella, Grandpa gave us money for your car." Not one of you said, "Here, take your Mercedes." I pointed directly at Lauren. You drove my car to Easter brunch. You parked it right out front. You let me admire it. You let me ask about it. And you told me it was from Derek's bonus. You looked me in the eye and lied. Lauren's face crumpled. I didn't know how to tell you, she whispered. By then it had been months. I thought maybe you would never find out. I caught Mom and Dad exchanging a glance. That silent communication they had always shared. The secret language I was never allowed to understand. But this time, I recognized what it meant. They were hiding something else. Something beyond the car. What? I demanded. What are you not telling me? Silence stretched. Mom picked at her cardigan. Dad stared at his hands. Lauren's crying stopped again, and she looked genuinely scared. Is there more? I pressed. What else did you do? Mom spoke too quickly, trying to deflect. The important thing is that the car served its purpose. It helped Lauren get back on her feet. And anyway, the car isn't really the issue anymore. I froze. What do you mean isn't really the issue? The car is the entire issue. Mom realized her mistake too late. Her face crumbled as she looked to Dad for rescue, but he just shook his head slowly, surrendering. "Where is the car?" I asked, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Is it still registered to Lauren? Does she still have it?" Lauren broke into fresh sobs. "I'm so sorry, Ella. I didn't want to. Derek said we had no choice. Does she still have it?" I repeated. "No," Lauren choked out. "We sold it 3 months ago. The air left my lungs." I felt the floor tilt beneath me, the world shifting on its axis. They hadn't just given my car to Lauren. They hadn't just let her drive it for months while I struggled. They had sold it. My gift from Grandpa. My $85,000? Gone. "You sold it," I breathed. "Sold my car? The one Grandpa bought for me?" Dad attempted to explain. Lauren and Derek had gotten into more debt. The credit cards weren't the only problem. There were other bills, medical expenses. The car was just sitting there, and they needed the cash. Lauren added desperately, "We got $72,000 for it." It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it helped. I know it was wrong, I know. My mind raced through the calculations. 85,000 became a car. The car sold for 72,000. 13,000 lost to depreciation. 72,000 given to Lauren and Derek to pay their debts. Total benefit to me, 0. Total loss, everything. "Let me understand this correctly," I said, my voice like ice. "Grandpa sent $85,000 for me. You bought a car, put it in Lauren's name. Lauren drove it for 5 months. Then you sold it and gave Lauren the cash. And I got a bicycle." No one answered. "At what point was I supposed to benefit from Grandpa's gift?" I continued. "At what point did any of you think about me?" Mom attempted to recover. "Ella, please understand. We always intended to make it up to you. Once Lauren was stable, we were going to explain. We were going to find a way to help you, too." "When, Mom? When exactly? Were you going to tell me at Christmas? On my birthday? Were you going to wait until Grandpa died so he'd never know what you did with his money?" Mom gasped. "Ella, that's cruel, is it?" I didn't flinch. "Because what you did wasn't just theft. You let Grandpa believe his gift had helped me. You thanked him on my behalf. You said I cried when I saw the car. You made him think he had given me something wonderful. And every time he saw me, he probably wondered why I seemed tired, why I was still struggling. You let him think I was okay because of his gift." I gathered my folder from the coffee table. "That's not just stealing from me, that's betraying him." The blow landed. Mom covered her face with both hands. Dad looked away. Lauren curled into herself on the love seat. "I'm leaving," I announced. "I need to think about what happens next." I walked toward the door but paused at the threshold. I turned back to face my family, this broken, deceitful family that had hidden behind the word love while systematically robbing me. "I want you to understand something," I said. "I spent my whole life being the strong one. I never asked for help because I thought you would give it if I really needed it. I thought family took care of each other. But now I see the truth." My voice steadied, hardened into something I barely recognized. Being strong wasn't a virtue. It was permission. Permission to overlook me. Permission to take from me. Permission to choose Lauren every single time. Lauren reached toward me, her face streaked with tears. "Ella, please, we're sisters." I met her eyes without flinching. Sisters don't steal each other's futures. I walked out without slamming the door. I closed it quietly behind me and walked down the driveway, past the Mercedes one more time. I saw my own reflection distorted in its silver paint, warped and unrecognizable. I got into the borrowed car and started the engine. My phone buzzed before I even left the curb. A text from Grandpa. How did it go? I stared at the message, trying to find words to summarize the devastation. How do you explain that everything you feared was true, and somehow even worse than you imagined? I typed back slowly. They sold it. They sold my car and gave Lauren the money. We need to talk about next steps. I think I need a lawyer. I pulled away from the curb and watched my childhood home shrink in the rearview mirror. The house where I had learned to walk, where I had blown out birthday candles, where I had believed I was part of a family that loved me. All of it had been a lie built on my silence and my willingness to sacrifice. But as the house disappeared behind me, something else emerged. Clarity. Cold, sharp, undeniable. If they wouldn't give me what was mine, I would take it back. Every dollar, every ounce of respect they had denied me, every piece of the future they had stolen. The old Ella would have cried the whole way home. The new Ella drove with steady hands and a clear mind, already planning the next move. I pulled over 3 blocks from my parents' house because my hands were shaking too badly to drive any further. The borrowed car idled on a quiet residential street in Beaverton while I sat frozen behind the wheel, trying to process what had just happened. They sold it. The words kept echoing in my skull like a drum beat. They took $85,000 meant for me, bought a car, gave it to Lauren, and then sold it and kept the money. And I got a bicycle. The dam broke without warning. One moment I was staring at the steering wheel, and the next I was sobbing so hard I couldn't catch my breath. Not the quiet, dignified tears I had trained myself to shed in private. These were ugly, gasping sobs that racked my entire body, the kind that come from somewhere deep and wounded, somewhere that had been holding pain for far too long. I cried for every morning I had pedaled through Portland rain, arriving at work with water dripping from my hair and my clothes plastered to my skin. I cried for every meal I had skipped because groceries cost too much that week. I cried for every time I had told myself things would get better while my family watched me struggle with the solution sitting in their bank account. 8 months of unnecessary suffering. That was the part I couldn't wrap my mind around. Every hardship I had endured since my divorce could have been prevented. Every sacrifice I had made was avoidable. If only they had given me what was mine. But they had looked at Grandpa's gift, looked at me struggling, and decided I didn't need it. They had decided Lauren deserved it more because she cried louder, demanded more, made herself impossible to ignore. I had made the fatal mistake of being strong, of handling things on my own, of not collapsing dramatically enough to warrant their attention. My phone buzzed relentlessly during my breakdown. I ignored it, letting the tears run until there was nothing left but a hollow ache in my chest and salt drying on my cheeks. When I finally picked up the phone, I found a flood of messages waiting. 6 missed calls from Mom. Her voicemails were exactly what I expected. "Ella, please come back. We can work this out. You're overreacting, sweetheart. I'm your mother. You can't just walk away from family." Each message more desperate than the last, but none containing an actual apology, none acknowledging what they had done wrong. 4 texts from Lauren. "I'm so sorry, please let me explain. I know you're angry, but you don't understand how desperate I was. Derek and I almost lost everything. And the final one that made my blood boil. Please don't destroy our family over money. Over money. As if I was the one who had destroyed anything. As if $85,000 stolen from me was just a minor inconvenience. As if asking for what was rightfully mine made me the problem." 2 texts from Dad, both infuriating in their predictability. "Your mother is very upset. I hope you'll reconsider your reaction to all this." Both messages about Mom's feelings. Nothing about mine, protecting his wife, as he had always done, enabling the favoritism that had defined my entire childhood. But there was one message that cut through the noise, a text from Grandpa, simple and direct. "Come back to my house when you're ready. I'm here, I love you, and I'm not letting this go." I wiped my face, took several deep breaths, and started driving toward Lake Oswego. Grandpa was waiting on the porch when I arrived, and his expression crumbled the moment he saw my swollen eyes and tear-streaked face. He didn't say anything. He just opened his arms, and I walked into his embrace like a child seeking shelter from a storm. "I know, sweetheart," he murmured as I clung to him. "I know." Inside, he guided me to the kitchen and put the kettle on for tea. I sat at the familiar table, the same one where he had helped me with homework decades ago, and told him everything. Every excuse my parents had offered, every tear Lauren had shed, every manipulative word Mom had spoken, and the final devastating revelation that they had sold the car 3 months ago and kept the money. When I finished, Grandpa sat in heavy silence. His weathered hands wrapped around his teacup, but he didn't drink. Finally he spoke, and his words made my stomach drop. 72,000. That's what they got for the car? I nodded. But I sent 85. His eyes sharpened with the focus of a man who had spent decades managing complex finances. Where did the other 13,000 go? I hadn't even thought about that. I had been so devastated by the sale that I hadn't stopped to do the arithmetic. Grandpa opened his laptop, already running calculations. A new Mercedes C-Class costs around 65 to 70,000. I sent 85 specifically so there would be cushion for taxes, registration, insurance, all the additional costs. His fingers tapped against the keys. Even after the purchase, there should have been 15 to 20,000 left over. The implication hit me like a physical blow. There was extra money from the very beginning. And then they sold the car for 72,000, Grandpa continued. So that's roughly $90,000 total that passed through their hands. Money that was meant for you. $90,000. The number made the room spin. An amount that could have changed my entire life had instead vanished into Lauren's endless financial disasters, while I rode a rusty bicycle through the rain. Grandpa stood abruptly and began pacing, a habit from his years running a business empire. I wonder, he said slowly, almost to himself, I wonder if this is the first time they've done something like this. The question unlocked something in my memory. Old suspicions I had buried, moments of confusion I had explained away, patterns I had refused to see. Grandpa, I said carefully, when you gave money for my wedding, how much did you give? He paused mid-step. 15,000. Same as Lauren. I wanted both my granddaughters to have beautiful weddings. My heart started pounding. I only received 3,000. Mom said that was all you could spare. The color drained from his face. 3,000? I wrote a check for 15. I handed it to your father myself. I thought about my wedding 7 years ago. The small courthouse ceremony. The potluck reception in a friend's backyard because I couldn't afford anything else. I had convinced myself it was romantic, intimate, exactly what I wanted. But all along, $12,000 of Grandpa's gift had been sitting in my parents' account, while Lauren threw a lavish celebration at a country club. There's something else, I continued, the memories flooding back. When I graduated from college, you mentioned sending money for my future. Grandpa was already moving toward his filing cabinet, pulling out folders I hadn't seen before. He rifled through papers until he found what he was looking for. A check from 10 years ago. $20,000 made out to my mother. The memo line read, "For Ella's future, education fund. 20,000. I felt the bile rising in my throat. I had 40,000 in student loans, Grandpa. I worked 2 jobs through school just to afford rent. Mom said you couldn't help much. She said money was tight." His hands trembled as he stared at the check. "I sent this specifically for your education. Your mother told me you had scholarships. She thanked me for making it possible for you to focus on your studies." We spent the next 2 hours going through his records. Grandpa was meticulous, a trait that had served him well in business. He had kept copies of every check, every transfer, every piece of correspondence with my parents over the years. And as we compared his records to what I actually remembered receiving, a devastating pattern emerged. The college education fund. 20,000 sent. 0 received. A 21st birthday gift. 2,000 sent. 0 received. My first apartment deposit when I moved to Seattle. 2,000 sent. 500 received. The wedding money. 15,000 sent. 3,000 received. And now the Mercedes. 85,000 sent. 1 rusty bicycle received. I wrote the final number on a legal pad and stared at it until my vision blurred. Total stolen over 10 years. Approximately $120,500. $120,000. More than enough for a down payment on a house. More than enough to wipe out my student debt twice over. More than enough to have given me a completely different life. Grandpa sank into his chair, looking every one of his 78 years. "I failed you," he whispered. Year after year, I thought I was helping you. I trusted my own daughter. I never verified. I never asked you directly if you received what I sent. I moved to his side and took his hand. His skin felt papery and fragile, the hands of a man who had just discovered his family was built on lies. "This isn't your fault," I told him firmly. "You were generous. You were loving. You tried to help me every chance you got. They intercepted everything. They used your love as an ATM for Lauren." "Your grandmother warned me," he said, his voice cracking. "She always said Patricia coddled Lauren too much. She worried about you, said you were too quiet, too self-sufficient. She told me once, Harold, just because Ella doesn't ask doesn't mean she doesn't need." He wiped his eyes. "I should have listened. I should have given everything directly to you." We sat in silence, the weight of a decade of betrayal pressing down on us. Then something shifted in Grandpa's expression. The grief hardened into determination. The slump of his shoulders straightened into resolve. "No more," he said. "This ends now. I want a full accounting of every dollar I've ever sent for you. And if they've been stealing from you for 10 years, they're going to pay back every cent." He reached for his phone. "I know an attorney. Diane Marsh. She handled my business contracts for years. Brilliant woman, doesn't take nonsense from anyone." He met my eyes. "Do you want me to call her?" I hesitated. Calling a lawyer meant making this official, legal, permanent. There would be no going back to pretending we were a normal family. No more Sunday dinners or holiday gatherings or birthday cards signed with love. Just legal documents and depositions and courtrooms. Part of me still wanted to forgive, to smooth things over, to be the good daughter who kept the peace at any cost. That instinct had been programmed into me for 3 decades. But another voice spoke louder. "Being good got you a bicycle. Being quiet got you student loans. Being strong got you nothing but the privilege of suffering alone." "Yes," I said. "Call her." Grandpa dialed. "Diane, Harold Richardson, I need your help. It's about my family. And my granddaughter. Someone's been stealing from us. We have proof." He listened for a moment, then nodded. "Monday morning, 9 a.m. We'll be there." He hung up and looked at me with something like pride. "You're doing the right thing, sweetheart." I wasn't sure anything about this felt right, but it felt necessary. I drove home as the sun set over Portland, the sky painted in shades of pink and orange that seemed to mock the darkness inside me. My apartment felt smaller than ever when I walked through the door. The evidence folders lay spread across my kitchen table where I had organized them that morning. The bicycle leaned against the wall by the door, a constant reminder of what they had given me instead of what I deserved. I couldn't look at it. I couldn't touch it. But I couldn't throw it away either. It was evidence now, proof of how little they thought I was worth. I sat on my bed with my laptop and created a new document. I titled it Timeline of Theft and began writing down everything I could remember. Every gift that never arrived, every excuse my parents had made, every suspicious moment I had dismissed over the years. The list grew longer than I expected. Small things I had forgotten or explained away. A graduation card from Grandpa that mentioned an enclosed check, but the envelope had been empty when it reached me. Mom said it must have fallen out. A birthday dinner where Grandpa asked if I'd received his gift, and Mom quickly changed the subject. A Christmas where Lauren got a new car while I got a sweater, and everyone acted like this was perfectly normal. Patterns I should have seen years ago if I hadn't been so desperate to believe my family loved me. My phone buzzed. Another text from Lauren. "Ella, I know you're upset, but please think about what you're doing. If you bring lawyers into this, it will destroy everything." Mom is beside herself. Dad isn't speaking. "You're tearing this family apart. I'm begging you, please. Can we just talk? I can explain everything. There's more to this than you understand." I read the message twice, looking for any hint of genuine remorse, any acknowledgement of what she had actually done. But there was nothing, just more manipulation, More attempts to make me feel guilty for demanding what was mine. More framing of herself as the victim. I typed back a single sentence. "There's nothing to explain. You stole from me for 10 years. Then I turned off my phone and tried to sleep. I didn't succeed. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the silver Mercedes parked in front of my parents' house. I saw Lauren's tear-streaked face as she begged me not to destroy the family. I saw my mother's desperate attempts to make excuses for the inexcusable. At 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went back to my laptop. I researched civil conversion and fraud. I read about statute of limitations for financial crimes. I looked up Diane Marsh and found a website full of impressive credentials and successful case outcomes. My phone buzzed with one final message. Not from my family this time, from an unknown number. "Ella, it's Derek, Lauren's husband. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but there are things you don't know, things that make this situation even worse than you think. Can we meet? Tomorrow, if possible. I have documents. Proof. I'm tired of being part of this lie." I stared at the message for a long time. Derek, who had benefited from my stolen car. Derek, who had sat at family dinners knowing what his wife had done. Derek, who was now apparently offering to help me. I didn't trust him. I couldn't, not yet. But I also couldn't ignore the possibility that he knew something important. Something that could strengthen my case. Something that could finally expose the full truth of what my family had done. I typed back carefully, "Where and when?" His reply came immediately. "Riverside Park, North Bench, tomorrow at 5. Come alone, don't tell Lauren." I set down my phone and stared at the ceiling until dawn broke over Portland. In a few hours, I would meet with a man who might be setting a trap or offering me the evidence I needed. In 2 days, I would sit in a lawyer's office and formally begin the process of suing my own family. The woman who had thanked her grandfather for a bicycle was gone. In her place was someone harder, colder, more determined than I had ever been. They had stolen my money. They had stolen my opportunities. They had stolen my trust. But they would not steal my future. Not anymore. The law office occupied the 14th floor of a sleek downtown Portland high-rise, all glass walls and expensive views of the Willamette River. I arrived at 8:45, 15 minutes early, because nervous energy had made it impossible to wait at home any longer. Grandpa was already there, sitting in the reception area in his best suit, the one Grandma had bought him 30 years ago. He stood when he saw me, and something in his expression steadied my racing heart. "We're doing the right thing," he said quietly, squeezing my hand. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to feel confident and righteous and certain. Instead, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump into an abyss I couldn't see the bottom of. The reception area was designed to intimidate and impress. Leather chairs, legal journals arranged on glass tables, soft jazz playing in the background. Certificates lined the walls, documenting degrees and achievements in successful cases. The receptionist offered coffee in a voice that suggested she knew exactly how anxious clients felt when they walked through these doors. I declined. My stomach was too tight for anything but the chamomile tea I hadn't been able to finish at home. At exactly 9 o'clock, the receptionist stood and gestured toward a hallway. "Ms. Richardson, Mr. Richardson, Attorney Marsh will see you now." Diane Marsh was not what I expected. I had imagined someone severe, corporate, intimidating. Instead, the woman who rose from behind a cluttered desk was warm and approachable, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a low bun and sharp eyes behind elegant glasses. She wore a charcoal suit with a burgundy blouse, powerful but not cold. Her handshake was firm and confident. "Harold," she said, greeting my grandfather first. "Good to see you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." Then she turned to me. "And you must be Ella. Please sit down, tell me everything." Her office was organized chaos, stacks of files arranged with a precision that suggested a brilliant mind at work. I noticed family photos on the credenza behind her desk. She had daughters, I realized. Maybe that was why Grandpa had chosen her. Maybe she would understand. I began with the dinner, the bicycle, Grandpa's confused question that had shattered my world. I walked her through the confrontation at my parents' house, Lauren's confession, the sale of the car. I laid the documents on her desk one by one. The emails, the bank transfers, the DMV registration showing the Mercedes in Lauren's name. My voice shook at first, but steadied as I spoke. There was something clarifying about presenting facts to someone who had no stake in protecting my family's reputation, no obligation to minimize or excuse, just a professional assessment of what had been done to me. Diane listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she set down her pen and met my eyes with an expression that made my chest tighten. "What you're describing is textbook civil conversion," she said. "Your grandfather designated funds for a specific purpose, your benefit. Your parents diverted those funds to another party without your knowledge or consent. Then they liquidated the asset and kept the proceeds." She paused to let the words sink in. "That's not a family disagreement, Ella. That's theft." The word hung in the air between us. Theft. I had thought it privately, felt it viscerally, but hearing a lawyer say it out loud made it real in a way nothing else had. "But I have a feeling there's more," Diane continued, leaning forward slightly. "You mentioned this might be part of a pattern. Tell me about that." I pulled out the document I had prepared over the weekend. My timeline of theft, organized chronologically, with amounts and dates and notes about what I remembered receiving versus what Grandpa's records showed he had sent. I handed it across the desk and watched Diane's expression shift from professional interest to genuine concern as she scanned the pages. The timeline included everything Grandpa and I had pieced together. The wedding money from 7 years ago, 15,000 sent, and only 3,000 received. The college graduation gift from 10 years ago, 20,000 designated for my education fund that I never saw a penny of. The 21st birthday gift that supposedly got lost in the mail. The first apartment deposit that arrived short by $1,500. And the Mercedes, 85,000 sent, one rusty bicycle received. Diane looked up from the document. "Have you confirmed these discrepancies with your grandfather?" "Only the wedding money and the college fund so far," I said. "But his records are meticulous. We're planning to verify each one." Grandpa spoke for the first time since we sat down. "I'll go through everything I have. Every check, every transfer, every gift I've ever sent for Ella." His voice was steel wrapped in grief. "If they've been doing this for a decade, I want to know the full extent." Diane nodded and made another note. "We need to verify each discrepancy. If there's a documented pattern of diversion over multiple years, that significantly strengthens your case." After the meeting, Grandpa and I drove back to Lake Oswego. His study was exactly as I remembered it from childhood visits: oak desk and filing cabinets and shelves lined with old business ledgers. The room where he had built his trucking empire through careful record-keeping and attention to detail. Now it would be the room where we uncovered a decade of betrayal. He pulled boxes from closets, folders from drawers, records going back further than I had realized he kept. There was a system to his organization, gifts sorted by recipient and year. We started with the wedding money, since that was the discrepancy I remembered most clearly. The canceled check was right where he expected to find it. $15,000, made out to Robert Richardson. The memo line read, "For Ella's wedding." The signature on the back was my father's handwriting. He had cashed it himself, deposited it into his own account, and given me only $3,000. I stared at my father's signature until my vision blurred. "Dad cashed it himself," I said, my voice hollow. "He kept $12,000 of my wedding money." Grandpa was already pulling out another file. "The college graduation gift," he muttered, flipping through papers. He found another check, this one made out to my mother. $20,000, dated 10 years ago. Memo: "For Ella's future, education fund." The room started spinning. 20,000? I had 40,000 in student loans, Grandpa. I worked 2 jobs through school just to pay rent. Mom told me you couldn't afford to help much. His hands trembled as he held the check. "I sent $20,000 specifically for your education. Your mother told me you had scholarships. She thanked me for making it possible for you to focus on your studies. We kept going. Hour after hour, comparing his records to my memories, building a comprehensive picture of just how thoroughly my family had been stealing from me. The full accounting emerged slowly, painfully, like cleaning a wound that had been infected for years. There was my 21st birthday. Grandpa had sent $2,000, a generous gift for a young woman just starting her adult life. I never received it. Mom had claimed the check got lost in the mail and was never reissued. There was my first apartment deposit when I moved to Seattle. Grandpa had offered to help, sending $2,000 to cover the cost. Mom said she would handle the transfer. I received $500. There was a Christmas gift from when I was 25. Grandpa's records showed a check for $1,000. I had no memory of ever receiving anything that year except a sweater. And those were just the ones we could document with certainty. There were other suspicious moments, other times when Grandpa mentioned sending something, and I had no memory of receiving it. Moments I had dismissed as miscommunication or forgetfulness, now recast in a sinister new light. I wrote the final number on a legal pad, then sat staring at it until my eyes burned. Total confirmed theft over 10 years, $120,500. That wasn't even including the Mercedes. That was just the historical pattern, the foundation of fraud they had been building for a decade before the $85,000 gift that finally exposed them. Grandpa looked like he had aged 10 years in the space of an afternoon. He sat in his armchair, the check from my college fund still clutched in his trembling hand, and I watched something break behind his eyes. "What else did they take from you?" he whispered. "What else did I fail to protect?" A memory surfaced unbidden, sharp and painful. I was 18 again, sitting in my cramped college dorm room, counting coins to see if I could afford both ramen and laundry that week. I had called Mom to ask if there was any way the family could help with textbooks, which cost far more than I had budgeted for. Her voice echoed in my mind. "Sweetheart, we're stretched thin right now. Lauren needs braces and your father's car broke down. Grandpa already gave what he could. We just can't do more." "You're so smart, Ella, you'll figure it out." "You always do. I had figured it out." I got a second job at the campus coffee shop, working weekends and holidays and late nights. I skipped meals to afford textbooks. I told myself I was building character, developing independence, learning to stand on my own feet. And the whole time, $20,000 sat in my parents' account, designated for my education, while I counted quarters for laundry. The rage that had been building inside me crystallized into something cold and clear, not the hot fury of betrayal, but something harder, something that clarified rather than blinded. "They watched me struggle," I said quietly. "They had the solution, and they chose not to give it." Grandpa reached for my hand, his grip stronger than I expected from a man his age. "No more," he said. "This ends now. We're going back to Diane with all of this. Tomorrow." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, then something made me answer. "Ella." The voice was male, nervous, familiar. "It's Derek, Lauren's husband." I went very still. Derek had benefited from my stolen car. Derek had sat at family dinners knowing what was happening. Derek had sent me that cryptic message about having information. "Why are you calling me?" "I need to talk to you," he said urgently. "Today, if possible. There are things you don't know, things that make this whole situation even worse." I laughed bitterly. How could it possibly be worse? A long pause. "Because the car wasn't just sold. Before they sold it, they took out a loan against it. They used your car as collateral to borrow $30,000. The floor dropped out from under me. A loan? They borrowed against my car? Yes. Derek's voice was shaking now. And that loan? It's still outstanding. They used the sale money to pay off credit cards and medical bills. The loan is still there. Technically, there's still $30,000 owed, secured against a car that doesn't exist anymore." The arithmetic rearranged itself in my head. $85,000 original gift. Car given to Lauren. $30,000 borrowed against it. Car sold for $72,000. Sale money used for other debts. Loan still outstanding. That's $115,000 connected to the Mercedes alone, plus the decade of previous theft. The number was staggering, obscene. "Why are you telling me this?" I demanded into the phone. "Because Lauren is my wife, but what she did is wrong." Derek's voice cracked. "And because your parents are making plans, they're talking about getting ahead of this, spinning the story, making you look like the ungrateful daughter who's tearing the family apart." "I can't be part of that anymore." "What kind of plans?" "I don't know the details, but I have documents, screenshots, proof of the loan. If you want it, it's yours. Meet me tomorrow, somewhere private." I looked at Grandpa, who had been listening to my half of the conversation with growing alarm. "Where and when?" I asked. "Riverside Park, the North Bench, 5 p.m. I'll be there. And Ella?" Derek's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Don't tell Lauren. Don't tell your parents. If they find out I'm helping you, I don't know what they'll do." The line went dead. I sat in my grandfather's study, phone still pressed to my ear, trying to process what I had just learned. The Mercedes situation was even worse than I thought. There was an outstanding loan, still accruing interest, secured against a car that no longer existed. My family hadn't just stolen from me. They had created a web of debt and fraud that was still growing. "What did he say?" Grandpa asked. I told him everything. The loan, the $30,000 still owed, the family meeting to plan their counterattack, Derek's offer to provide evidence. Grandpa's expression hardened. "This isn't just misappropriation anymore. This is fraud. Conspiracy. They took out a loan against property that was never theirs to begin with." "I know. We need to tell Diane. I know." I texted the attorney with an update. Derek, Lauren's husband, is willing to cooperate. He has documents proving they took a $30,000 loan against the Mercedes before selling it. The loan is still outstanding. Total damages connected to the car alone may be $115,000. Diane's reply came within minutes. "This changes everything. Bring everything Derek gives you. We're building a case they can't deny." That night, I lay in my cramped apartment, unable to sleep. The numbers kept rearranging themselves in my head. 120,000 stolen over a decade. 30,000 loans still outstanding. 85,000 original gift diverted. The figures blurred together into one undeniable conclusion. My family had been systematically robbing me for 10 years, and when caught, they had made it even worse. Tomorrow, I would meet Derek and get whatever evidence he had. The day after, I would go back to Diane with a case so documented, so irrefutable, that they would have no choice but to face what they had done. The woman who had thanked her grandfather for a bicycle was truly gone now. In her place was someone who understood a painful truth. Being strong didn't mean suffering in silence. Being strong meant fighting back. And I was ready to fight. I barely slept the night before, and it showed. Tuesday morning arrived gray and drizzling, typical October weather in Portland, and I dragged myself to work feeling like I was moving through water. The marketing firm occupied a renovated warehouse in the Pearl District, all exposed brick and expensive coffee and colleagues who looked effortlessly put together. I did not look put together. I looked like a woman who had spent the night staring at the ceiling, calculating $120,000 of stolen money, and wondering what fresh horrors Derek's documents would reveal. My desk felt like a prison by 9 a.m. I stared at the same email for 15 minutes without reading a single word, my mind replaying the phone call with Derek on an endless loop. A $30,000 loan against my car. Still outstanding, still accruing interest, secured against an asset that no longer existed because they had sold it to pay off other debts. The coffee I had poured sat cold in my mug. My hands trembled slightly whenever I tried to type. Every few minutes I caught myself staring out the window at the rain, lost in thoughts that had nothing to do with the quarterly marketing report due by end of week. How was I supposed to care about campaign metrics when my entire family had been systematically robbing me for a decade? The weight of secrecy made everything worse. I couldn't tell my coworkers why I was distracted. I couldn't explain why I kept checking my phone, waiting for 5 o'clock to arrive so I could meet Derek at Riverside Park. I couldn't admit that the people who were supposed to love me had stolen enough money to buy a house. I was surrounded by people and completely alone. Around 10, I got up to refill my coffee, more for the motion than the caffeine. I nearly collided with someone in the break room doorway, and a hand caught my elbow to steady me as coffee sloshed dangerously close to the rim. Whoa, careful. That's a lot of caffeine for 10 a.m. I looked up into the concerned face of Marcus Cole, senior account manager, 3 doors down from my cubicle. We had worked on a few projects together over the past year, friendly but not close. He was maybe 35, with kind eyes and an easy competence that never needed to announce itself. The type of person who noticed things other people missed. "Long night," I said, forcing a smile that probably looked as hollow as it felt. "Big presentation later this week." He didn't buy it. I could see the skepticism in the way he studied my face, taking in the dark circles I had tried to conceal, and the tension I couldn't quite hide. "You've had a lot of long nights lately," he observed. "Just busy. You know how it is." I moved toward the coffee maker, avoiding his eyes. But Marcus didn't retreat. He followed me into the break room, leaning against the counter as I refilled my mug with hands that weren't entirely steady. "I saw you bike in this morning," he said. "In the rain, again. You know there's an underground parking garage, right? If you ever need a ride or anything." The mention of biking hit differently now. Every soggy commute was no longer just an inconvenience. It was a reminder of the Mercedes I never received, the fresh start that was stolen before I even knew it existed. "I like the exercise," I lied. "Clears my head." Marcus nodded, but something in his expression told me he wasn't convinced. "Well, if your head ever needs a break from clearing, my office is 3 doors down. Doors always open. For whatever." He refilled his own mug and left, and I stood there longer than I should have, watching him go. Something about his quiet steadiness made my eyes sting. When was the last time someone had noticed I was struggling without trying to use it against me? I forced myself back to my desk and stared at the marketing report until the words started to make sense. The mechanical work provided brief escape, but every pause, every breath, the betrayal flooded back. The numbers I had calculated with Grandpa kept rearranging themselves in my mind. $120,500 in confirmed historical theft, $30,000 in outstanding loan, $85,000 for the Mercedes. The figures were staggering, obscene, impossible to fully comprehend. At 2 o'clock, I delivered my presentation on autopilot. I hit all the major points, answered questions competently, smiled when appropriate. Nobody seemed to notice I was hollow inside. The professional mask held firm, even as everything behind it crumbled. After the meeting, my boss complimented my work. Colleagues chatted about weekend plans. Normal life continued all around me while my personal world burned. The clock moved painfully slowly. 3 p.m., 2 hours until Derek. 4 o'clock, 1 hour. I packed up early at 4:30, claiming a headache that wasn't entirely fictional. Nobody questioned it. I walked out of the office into the gray Portland afternoon and caught the Max train toward Riverside Park. The journey felt surreal. I watched people on the train, couples and families and friends, and wondered how many of them were hiding betrayals. How many of them were the betrayal. Riverside Park stretched along the Willamette River, a green respite in the middle of the city. At this time of day, in this weather, it was mostly empty. A few joggers, a dog walker, a homeless man sleeping on a bench. Perfect conditions for a secret meeting with my sister's husband. I found the north bench easily. It was partially hidden by trees, isolated from the main walking paths. Derek wasn't there yet. I sat down and watched the river move slowly past, gray-green and indifferent to my crisis. The water had no opinion about stolen money or family betrayal. It just kept flowing, steady and eternal. 5 minutes felt like 30. I checked my phone obsessively. 4:58. 4:59. The urge to flee was almost overwhelming. Then footsteps on gravel behind me. I turned. Derek approached with his shoulders hunched against the drizzle, a manila folder clutched to his chest like a shield. He looked terrible. Unshaven, red-eyed, wearing a wrinkled shirt that suggested he hadn't slept any better than I had. Whatever was happening to my family, it was destroying him too. "Thanks for coming," he said, sinking onto the bench beside me without making eye contact. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't." "I know." He swallowed hard. "I know how this looks. I've been part of it. I drove that car. I sat at family dinners knowing what they did." "Yes, you did." He flinched at the coldness in my voice but didn't argue. "I deserve that. But I swear to you, Ella, I didn't know the truth until the dinner, until your grandfather asked about the house and you said you never received anything. The house." He meant the car. My family had adapted the lie so many times, even Derek was confused about the details. "Lauren told me the Mercedes was a gift from your parents," he continued. "A thank you for helping with some project." I didn't question it. Why would I? She's my wife. His voice cracked on that last word, present tense, but barely. "After the dinner, after I saw your face and your grandfather's face, I started asking questions, and Lauren broke down. She told me everything. The money was yours. The car was supposed to be yours. And then she told me about the loan." "The loan details," I prompted when he paused. Derek's hands twisted together in his lap. 3 months after we got the car, Lauren said we needed cash. Credit card bills were piling up. We were behind on rent. She said she could get a loan using the car as collateral. He swallowed again. I asked if that was legal, if the car was really ours to leverage. She said your parents had given it to us officially, no strings attached. So I signed the papers. You signed. My name is on the loan too, me and Lauren. We're both liable. The arithmetic rearranged itself again. $30,000 borrowed against my car by my sister and her husband. A debt I hadn't created, but that was connected to assets that should have been mine. "How much did you get?" I asked. $30,000, Pacific Northwest Credit Union. He opened the manila folder and pulled out a document. Loan agreement, right there in black and white, secured against a Mercedes-Benz C-Class, the same car that was supposed to be mine. I took the paper and scanned it. Borrowers: Lauren Michelle Richardson Hartley and Derek Hartley. Loan amount: $30,000. Collateral: vehicle, Mercedes-Benz C-Class. The date was May of this year, 3 months after they received the car that Grandpa had intended for me. "What happened to the money?" I asked. "Credit cards, mostly. Medical bills from when Lauren had that health scare last winter. Other debts I didn't even know about." His voice dropped. "By the time the loan money hit our account, it was already spent. We were just trying to stay afloat. And then, you sold the car." Derek nodded miserably. 3 months ago, Lauren said we could use the sale to pay off the loan and still have money left over. But you didn't pay off the loan." "No." He pulled out another document. Current loan statement. Principal remaining, $28,400. Payments, delinquent. Status, collection warning issued. I stared at the numbers. They weren't paying it. The car doesn't even exist anymore and you're not making payments. We don't have the money. The sale barely covered the credit cards. And now your parents are scared. They're not offering to help anymore. Derek's hands were shaking. "And I think they're going to try to pin this on us. Make us the scapegoats. The betrayal within the betrayal. My family had stolen my car, borrowed against it, sold it, kept the money, and now they were going to abandon Lauren and Derek to the debt." "There's one more thing," Derek said, reaching into his folder again. His hand came out with a printed screenshot, a text message exchange between Lauren and my mother, dated yesterday. I read it with growing horror. Lauren had written, "What do we do if Ella goes to a lawyer?" Mom's reply, "We deny everything. Say Dad was confused. Say the money was always for the family, not just Ella." Lauren again, "What about Derek? He knows too much." Mom's response made my blood run cold. If it comes to it, we say Derek pressured you. He's the outsider. Easier to blame. They're going to throw me under the bus, Derek said, his voice cracking completely now. Your mother, your sister, my own wife. They're planning to blame everything on me. I looked at him, really looked. He was crying now, quietly, embarrassed by his own tears. A grown man coming apart on a park bench because the family he had married into was preparing to sacrifice him. He wasn't a villain. He was a fool who had trusted the wrong people. Just like Grandpa. Just like me. You're giving me all of this, I said slowly, knowing it implicates you too. Derek nodded. I'd rather face the truth than be their fall guy. I'd rather lose everything honestly than keep anything through lies. I gathered the documents he had given me. Loan agreement, payment statement, screenshot of the conspiracy to blame him, evidence that strengthened my case exponentially. I'm meeting with my lawyer again, I told him. If you're willing to provide a formal statement, it would help. Not just me. You too. Get ahead of their story. Whatever you need, he said. I'm done protecting them. Lauren is still my wife, but I don't know who she is anymore, and your parents were supposed to be my family too. He stood to leave, then paused. There's something else Lauren said, when she was confessing everything to me. What? His jaw tightened. She said your mom told her this wasn't the first time they'd redirected your grandfather's gifts. She said there had been others, for years. Your mom called it managing expectations. Managing expectations. A clinical phrase for systematic theft. A polite way to describe a decade of robbing me blind. Derek walked away, leaving me alone on the bench with documents that proved my family's betrayal was even deeper than I had imagined. That evening, I spread everything across my kitchen table, the loan agreement, the payment history, the screenshot of my mother planning to frame Derek. I added them to the growing file of evidence, organizing everything chronologically, creating a paper trail that no lawyer could ignore. The mathematics kept getting worse. $85,000 original gift, $30,000 loan still outstanding, $120,000 in historical theft. The numbers blurred together into one damning conclusion. My family owed me roughly $150,000. Maybe more. I texted Grandpa with an update. Met with Derek. He gave me everything. It's worse than we thought. Much worse. Can we meet with Diane tomorrow? His reply came quickly. I'll call her first thing. We'll make it happen. You're not alone in this, sweetheart. I set down my phone and stared at the evidence covering my table. Then, unexpectedly, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. The text made me blink. Ella, this is Marcus. From work. Got your number from the company directory. Hope that's okay. I know it's late, but I wanted to check on you. You seemed really off today. More than usual. No pressure to explain. Just wanted you to know someone noticed. If you ever need to talk, or just need someone to sit with you while you don't talk, I'm here. The kindness caught me off guard. A co-worker I barely knew, reaching out at 10 p.m. because he noticed I was struggling. Not because he wanted something. Not because he was obligated. Just because he cared. I typed back slowly. Thank you, Marcus. Really, I might take you up on that sometime. Tonight I'm just trying to survive. His reply came immediately. Surviving is enough. See you tomorrow. I set down the phone and looked at the documents on my table, then at the bicycle still leaning by the door. Tomorrow I would meet with Diane and present everything Derek had given me. Tomorrow the legal machinery would start to move. But tonight there was one small mercy. Someone had seen me struggling and offered help without strings attached. It wasn't much, but after everything my family had done, it felt like a miracle. The conference room on the 14th floor felt like a war room. Morning light streamed through tall windows overlooking the Willamette River, illuminating a mahogany table large enough for 12 but holding only 4. I sat beside Grandpa, my folder of evidence organized and ready. Across from us, attorney Diane Marsh reviewed the documents I had collected over the past week with the focused intensity of someone preparing for battle. And at the far end of the table, looking like he hadn't slept in days, sat Derek. He had arrived separately, parking 3 blocks away and entering through a side door to avoid being seen. His fear of Lauren discovering where he was radiated from him like heat. Every few minutes he glanced at his phone, checking for messages from the wife he was about to betray. Grandpa regarded Derek with a complicated expression I couldn't quite read. Sympathy mixed with suspicion. This was the man who had driven the stolen car, who had signed the fraudulent loan, who had sat at family dinners knowing what was happening. But he was also the man who had chosen truth when he could have stayed silent. Diane closed the folder she had been reviewing and looked at Derek with sharp, assessing eyes. "Let's start from the beginning," she said. "I want the complete picture. Derek, I understand you have information that expands what we already know. This is a safe space. Attorney-client privilege extends to this meeting. Tell us everything." Derek took a shaky breath and opened his own folder of documents. His hands were trembling. "I need you to understand," he began, his voice unsteady. "I didn't know, not at first. When Lauren and I got married 3 years ago, her family seemed normal, loving, close. The kind of family I always wanted but never had." He paused, gathering himself. "I grew up in foster care. No parents, no siblings, nobody who claimed me. When the Richardsons welcomed me in, I was so grateful, so willing to believe the best about them. I didn't ask questions I should have asked." "The Mercedes," Diane prompted gently. "When the car appeared in February, Lauren told me it was a gift from her parents. A thank you for helping Robert with some home improvement project. I thought it was excessive, but they seemed like generous people. Why would I question it?" His voice cracked slightly, but things started not adding up. Lauren was anxious all the time, secretive about our finances. She would get calls from Patricia and suddenly need to handle something, always vague about what. When I asked questions, she deflected, said I was being paranoid. "And the dinner," Diane said. "That's when everything changed." Derek nodded. "When Harold asked about the car and Ella said she never received anything, I saw their faces, Lauren and Patricia. That wasn't confusion. That was fear. The fear of being caught." He pulled out his phone, and something in his expression shifted from nervousness to determination. "After the dinner, I couldn't sleep, so I did something I'm not proud of. I went through Lauren's phone while she was in the shower. The room went very still. I know it was wrong," Derek continued. "Invasion of privacy. But I needed to know the truth. And what I found changed everything." He handed his phone to Diane, who studied the screen with growing intensity. I leaned forward, desperate to see what had prompted this betrayal of his own wife. "Text messages," Derek explained. "Years of them, between Lauren and Patricia, planning everything." Diane scrolled through the messages, her expression hardening with each swipe. She began reading selected excerpts aloud, and with every word, my understanding of my family's betrayal deepened into something far worse than I had imagined. From 8 months ago, when the Mercedes money arrived. Lauren had written, "Dad sending money for Ella, $85,000 for a car." Patricia's response, "That's a lot." Lauren again, "We need that money. Derek's out of work and we're drowning." And Patricia, my own mother, "I know, we'll handle it. Ella's strong, she'll bounce back." There it was, documented proof. They had planned the theft before the money even arrived, but Diane kept scrolling, going further back. The messages weren't just about the car, they stretched back years, and the pattern that emerged made my stomach turn. From 7 years ago, around the time of my wedding, Lauren had written, "How much is Grandpa giving for Ella's wedding?" Patricia's reply, $15,000. Lauren's response, "That's not fair. My wedding cost way more. Can't you redirect some of it?" And 2 days later, Patricia's message, "Done. Ella's getting $3,000. Rest goes to family fund." Lauren's reply, "Perfect. She won't notice. She's doing courthouse anyway." I felt the blood drain from my face. My wedding. My small, intimate courthouse wedding that I had convinced myself was romantic because I couldn't afford anything more. They had stolen $12,000 from me and laughed about it. Diane kept reading. There was more, so much more. From 10 years ago when I graduated college. Lauren, did Grandpa send Ella's graduation gift? Patricia, $20,000. He's so generous with her. Lauren, that's not fair, I didn't get that much. Patricia, you got your tuition paid. Ella took loans. Lauren, so? She chose loans. She could have asked for help. And then, 1 week later, redirected to family expenses. Ella won't know. Lauren's grateful response. Thanks, Mom. You always understand. The room was spinning. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself as the truth crashed over me in waves. This wasn't just my parents making bad decisions under pressure. This wasn't Mom and Dad choosing to help the daughter who seemed to need it more. This was Lauren, actively requesting the theft, pushing our mother to redirect funds meant for me, orchestrating her own enrichment at my expense for over a decade. She asked for this, I whispered, barely recognizing my own voice. Every time. She asked Mom to steal from me. Diane looked up from the phone, her expression grave. This changes everything, she said. These messages show a clear pattern of conspiracy to defraud. Lauren wasn't just a passive recipient. She was the primary instigator. I looked at Derek, who sat with his head bowed, tears streaming silently down his face. I asked him the question that had been forming since he first sat down. You said you didn't know until the dinner, but Lauren confessed everything to you afterward. Why are you here? Why are you helping me instead of her? Derek lifted his head, meeting my eyes for the first time since we had entered the room. Because I found something else in those messages, something that made me realize I never really knew the woman I married. He took his phone back from Diane and scrolled to a different conversation. This one was from 2 days ago, after the confrontation at my parents' house, after I had left with threats of lawyers ringing in my ears. Lauren had written to Patricia, "What do we do if Ella actually goes through with this?" Patricia's response, "We deny everything. Say Dad's confused. Cognitive decline, maybe. His testimony won't hold up." Lauren, "What about Derek? He's been asking too many questions." And my mother's reply, the words that had driven Derek to betray his own wife. "If it comes to it, we say Derek pressured you into everything. He's the outsider. Easier to blame." "They were going to make me the scapegoat," Derek said, his voice raw with pain. "My own wife, her mother. They were planning to throw me under the bus to save themselves." I looked at him differently then. Not as a co-conspirator who had benefited from my stolen car. Not as Lauren's enabler, but as another victim of my family's manipulation. Another person who had trusted the wrong people and was now paying the price. Diane had been taking notes throughout Derek's confession. Now she set down her pen and addressed him directly. "You understand that providing this testimony puts you in a complicated legal position," she said. "You co-signed the loan. You benefited from the stolen vehicle. You have exposure here." "I know," Derek replied. "I've thought about nothing else for days. But I can't live with this anymore. Lauren is my wife. Maybe I still love her. But I didn't sign up to be part of a decade-long theft operation." His jaw tightened with resolve. "I'll give a sworn statement. Everything I know. I'll testify if this goes to court. And I'll cooperate with whatever Ella and Harold decide to pursue." Grandpa spoke for the first time since we had sat down. His voice was steady, but I could hear the grief underneath. "What happens to my money if we pursue this legally?" Diane considered the question carefully. "Based on what we have here, we're looking at multiple causes of action. Civil conversion for the Mercedes and the redirected funds. Fraud for the systematic deception. Potentially elder financial abuse, given that they exploited your trust and generosity to steal from your granddaughter." "Elder abuse?" Grandpa straightened in his chair. "Against me?" "They manipulated your relationship with your grandchildren to divert designated gifts," Diane explained. "That's a form of financial exploitation of a senior. Prosecutors take it seriously. Criminal charges are possible for Patricia and Robert. Maybe for Lauren, too." The weight of those words settled over the room. Criminal charges. Prison time. For my mother, my father, my sister. A week ago, I would have done anything to avoid that outcome. Now I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. The loan situation complicates things, Diane continued. Derek, how far behind are the payments now? 3 months, he admitted. The notice I showed Ella was from last week, but we missed another payment since then. Lauren keeps saying she'll handle it, but she won't. Or can't. A secured loan 3 months delinquent is in serious default territory, Diane said. The lender will pursue aggressive collection. And since the collateral no longer exists, they'll come after the borrowers personally. That's you and Lauren. Derek nodded miserably. I know. But here's the complication, Diane continued. The loan was fraudulently obtained against property that wasn't Lauren's to leverage. That could potentially shift liability back to Patricia and Robert, who facilitated the original theft. I ran the numbers in my head one more time. $85,000 original gift, $30,000 outstanding loan, $120,000 in historical theft. The total exceeded $150,000. More than enough to change someone's life. More than enough to have changed mine. Diane outlined her recommended next steps. First, a comprehensive demand letter itemizing every documented theft, from the Mercedes all the way back to my college fund. Total demand, $150,500 plus interest. 14-day deadline. Consequences clearly stated: civil lawsuit and potential criminal referral for fraud and elder financial abuse. Second, Derek's sworn statement, formally documenting everything he knew with text message evidence attached as exhibits. His testimony on record before the family could pressure him to recant. Third, preservation of all evidence. Documents scanned and backed up. Derek's phone archived in case Lauren tried to delete the message history. Bank records from Grandpa secured and organized. Whatever it costs, Grandpa said when Diane finished. Whatever it takes. They used my money to hurt my granddaughter for 10 years. That ends now. I looked around the room at my unlikely alliance. A grandfather who had finally seen through his daughter's lies. A brother-in-law who had chosen truth over loyalty. An attorney who would fight for justice I had never dared to demand. I never wanted this, I said quietly. I never wanted to fight my own family. Diane met my eyes with understanding. They didn't give you a choice. No. They didn't. They decided I didn't matter. They decided I was expendable. My voice steadied as something inside me hardened into resolve. This isn't revenge. This is refusing to be erased. We spent another hour going over details, signing documents, preparing for the battle ahead. When we finally emerged from the conference room, the morning had turned to early afternoon. Derek slipped out through the side entrance, heading to a hotel where Lauren couldn't find him. Grandpa looked exhausted but determined as we rode the elevator down together. In the lobby, we parted ways with nods rather than hugs. Too much had happened for casual warmth, but there was understanding between us. Solidarity. I stepped outside into the gray Portland afternoon and checked my phone for the first time in hours. 17 missed calls, all from the same number. Mom. I didn't listen to all the voicemails, just skimmed the transcriptions. Ella, where is Derek? He didn't come home last night. Then, Ella, what have you done? What did you tell him? And, Ella, if you're behind this, if you've turned him against us? The final message, left 30 minutes ago, stopped me cold. Ella Richardson, you call me back right now. I know you're with a lawyer. I know what you're planning. And I swear to God, if you destroy this family, you will regret it for the rest of your life. I stared at the threat from my own mother. Not an apology, not an explanation, not even an attempt at reconciliation, just a threat. I screenshotted the voicemail transcription and texted it to Diane. My mother just threatened me. Voicemail attached. Her reply came in seconds. Perfect. Let her keep talking. Every word is a gift to our case. I pocketed my phone and tilted my face toward the gray sky. The rain had started again, soft at first, then steady. I didn't move to find shelter. Let it rain. Let it all come down. I had already survived worse storms, and I was just getting started. The email arrived at 6:47 on Thursday morning, before I had even finished my first cup of coffee. I sat at my kitchen table, still in my robe, staring at the notification on my phone. From Diane Marsh. Subject line: Final draft, Richardson demand letter. Please review. Attachment: 12-page PDF. I opened it with trembling fingers and read every word. The letter was a masterpiece of legal precision. It itemized every theft Diane and I had documented: the Mercedes, the college fund, the wedding money, the smaller diversions across a decade. Total demand: $150,500 plus 6% annual interest. Deadline: 14 days from receipt. Consequences: civil lawsuit, potential criminal referral for fraud and elder financial abuse. Seeing it laid out in formal legal language made everything feel different, more real, more permanent. This wasn't just a family argument anymore. This was a legal action that would create records, generate court filings, become part of the public documentation of who my family really was. I typed my response with steady hands. Approved. Send it. 3 words that would detonate my family. Diane replied within minutes. Sent via certified mail and email. All 3 parties: Patricia, Robert, and Lauren. Receipt confirmation requested. The clock starts now. I set down my phone and stared at the ceiling of my tiny apartment. In 14 days, my family would either pay what they owed or face me in court. There was no middle ground anymore, no possibility of pretending this hadn't happened. I drove to Lake Oswego later that morning to tell Grandpa in person. The news felt too significant for a phone call, but as I turned onto his street, something felt wrong. The porch light was still on from the night before. Grandpa never forgot to turn off lights. 2 days' worth of newspapers sat piled by the front door. The garden looked neglected in a way I had never seen. I knocked, then used my spare key when no one answered. "Grandpa," I called into the quiet house. "It's Ella." I found him in the living room, still wearing yesterday's clothes, sitting in his armchair and staring at nothing. A cup of tea sat cold and untouched on the table beside him. He looked older than he had 2 days ago, smaller somehow. The weight of betrayal had aged him in ways I hadn't anticipated. "Grandpa? Are you okay?" He looked up slowly, taking a moment to focus on my face. "Ella, sweetheart, I didn't hear you come in." His voice was tired, older than I had ever heard it. I sat beside him on the ottoman and took his cold hand in mine. "When did you last eat?" He had to think about it. "Yesterday? Maybe the day before?" "Grandpa, I know." He squeezed my hand weakly. "I keep thinking about what they did, all the years. Every gift I sent, every check I wrote, thinking I was helping you. And they just took it, like it was nothing. Like you were nothing." His eyes filled with tears, and my heart cracked open. In 78 years of life, through building a business empire, through losing his wife to cancer, through every hardship I had witnessed, I had never once seen my grandfather cry. "I failed you, Ella," he whispered. "For 10 years, I failed you." I moved to sit on the arm of his chair, wrapping my arm around his shoulders the way he used to hold me when I was small. "No, Grandpa, you didn't fail me. You trusted your own daughter. That's not a crime. What they did is the crime." We sat together in silence for a long moment, 2 people bound by grief and betrayal, trying to find solid ground in a world that had shifted beneath our feet. I took charge of the morning the way he had taken charge of so many crises in my childhood. I made fresh tea and found crackers in his kitchen. I opened curtains and let light flood the dim rooms. I sat with him while he ate a little, watching the color slowly return to his face. "Your grandmother warned me," he said between small bites. "She always said Patricia coddled Lauren too much. She worried about you, said you were too quiet, too self-sufficient. She told me once, Harold, just because Ella doesn't ask doesn't mean she doesn't need." "I miss her," I said quietly. "So do I. Every day." He set down his teacup and met my eyes. "She would have caught this years ago. She would have asked you directly whether you received what I sent. I should have done the same. You're doing it now. That's what matters." I noticed his breathing was shallow, his color still not quite right. "When was your last doctor's appointment?" He waved off my concern. "I'm fine, just tired." "You're not fine. You're not eating, you're not sleeping. I'll be fine once this is resolved." I made him promise to see his doctor the next day. Non-negotiable. He agreed with a faint smile that reminded me of the grandfather I knew before all this began. "Bossy," he said, "just like your grandmother." I was in his kitchen making soup when my phone started buzzing relentlessly. Text after text, notification after notification. The family had received the demand letter. Mom's messages came in rapid succession, each more hysterical than the last. "What is this? Ella, what have you done? A demand letter? Are you insane? You're going to destroy this family over money? Your father is beside himself. I hope you're happy. Call me right now." Dad sent one text, formal and cold. "Ella, this is extremely disappointing. I expected better from you. We will be consulting our own attorney." From Lauren, nothing. Complete silence. The mastermind was calculating her next move. I didn't respond to any of them. Diane had been clear. Let them react. Don't engage. Everything they say can be used later. I screenshot every message and forwarded them to her. Documentation, evidence, ammunition. Mom's voicemails piled up throughout the afternoon. I didn't listen to them all, just skimmed the transcriptions. Crying, guilt-tripping, threatening in turn. "How could you do this to your own mother? After everything we've done for you. If you think you can take money from this family, you have another thing coming." I showed Grandpa the messages. His jaw tightened as he read through them. Not one apology, he observed. Not one acknowledgement of what they did. Just anger that they got caught. That tells you everything you need to know. He was right. In all those hysterical texts and tearful voicemails, not once did my mother admit she had done anything wrong. Not once did she say the words, "I'm sorry." It was all about her feelings, her reputation, the family she claimed I was destroying, as if I was the one who had spent 10 years stealing. The next morning, I went back to work because I didn't know what else to do. The marketing firm felt surreal after everything that had happened, all these people going about their normal lives while mine was in chaos. I sat at my desk and stared at spreadsheets and tried to pretend I was a person who cared about quarterly metrics. Marcus appeared at my cubicle around 11 with 2 cups of coffee. "You look like you could use this." I accepted the cup gratefully. "Thanks. Long night." He leaned against my cubicle wall, studying me with those observant eyes. "You've had a lot of those lately." "Family stuff," I said vaguely. "It's complicated. Family stuff usually is." He took a sip of his coffee. "I'm not going to pry. But if you ever want to talk about it or even just need a distraction, I know a decent Thai place around the corner." My treat. The offer was so normal, so kind, that I felt tears prick my eyes unexpectedly. Since when did anyone offer to help me without expecting something in return? "That actually sounds nice," I admitted. "Maybe later today? I could use a break." His smile was warm and uncomplicated. 1 o'clock, I'll come get you." Lunch with Marcus was the first normal hour I had experienced in weeks. He didn't push me to talk about my problems. Instead, he told me about hiking trails he had discovered, about his weekend plans, about a terrible movie he had watched that was so bad it became entertaining. I found myself actually laughing for the first time since Grandpa's dinner. Eventually, though, I opened up a little. Just enough. "I'm dealing with some family drama," I told him. "It's turned into a legal situation. I'm kind of in the middle of a war I never wanted to fight." Marcus nodded, his expression sympathetic but not pitying. I figured it was something like that. "You've seemed different lately. Heavier. Like you're carrying something no one else can see. That's exactly what it feels like." He hesitated, then said something that surprised me. "By the way, I looked into that Mercedes dealership thing you mentioned." I went very still. I never mentioned a dealership to him. A friend of mine works at the Pacific Motors location on Burnside, he continued, if you ever need to track down sales records or anything like that. How did you know about a Mercedes? He had the grace to look embarrassed. I overheard you on the phone the other day, in the break room. You were talking to someone about a car, about family, about theft. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but once I heard, I couldn't unhear. My guard went up immediately. Has he been investigating me? Was he going to gossip? Could I trust him? Marcus read my expression and held up his hands. I'm not trying to get involved. I'm not going to tell anyone. I just have a friend who might be able to help, that's all. If you want the help. If you don't, we never had this conversation. I considered his offer. Independent dealership records would corroborate everything Derek had told me. Documentation that didn't come from my family at all. It could be valuable. Your friend can be discreet? Completely. Off the books. Let me think about it. I'll let you know. We walked back to the office together, and I found myself feeling slightly less alone than I had that morning. An unexpected ally in an unexpected place. That evening, I sat in my apartment surrounded by evidence folders and waited. Lauren still hadn't responded to the demand letter. Mom's hysterics had died down, replaced by ominous silence. Dad hadn't contacted me again after his single cold text. The waiting was almost worse than the fighting. At least when they were attacking, I knew what I was dealing with. This silence felt like the calm before something worse. My phone buzzed around 10 p.m. A text from an unknown number that turned out to be Lauren. The message was long and cold and calculated. Ella, I received your lawyer's letter. Very impressive. But you've made a serious miscalculation. You think you have evidence? You think Derek is on your side? You think Grandpa's word matters? Let me tell you how this is actually going to go. Grandpa is 78 years old. His memory isn't what it used to be. Any lawyer we hire will argue he's confused, maybe even suffering cognitive decline. Derek is a co-conspirator trying to save himself. His testimony is worthless. And you? You're a bitter divorcee who's jealous of her more successful sister. That's the story we'll tell, and people will believe it, because I'm the likable one. I always have been. My blood ran cold as I kept reading. Drop this, now. Walk away. If you don't, I will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. I'll tell the extended family. I'll tell your co-workers. I'll tell anyone who will listen. You'll be the crazy, greedy, ungrateful daughter who tried to destroy her own family. Your choice. I read Lauren's threat 3 times. The mask was fully off now. No tears, no apologies, no pretense of being the fragile little sister who never meant any harm. This was the real Lauren, strategic, ruthless, calculating. I screenshot the entire message and forwarded it to Diane with a note. Lauren's response. She's threatening to discredit Grandpa's mental competence and paint me as unstable. Diane's reply came in 2 minutes. This is exactly what we needed. She just admitted she knows about the evidence and is planning to obstruct. Keep her talking if you can. I stared at my phone, considering my options. I could ignore Lauren. I could try to reason with her. I could fire back with threats of my own. Instead, I typed the truth. Lauren, I'm not dropping anything. I have 10 years of documentation proving what you did. Grandpa has bank records. Derek has texts. I have everything. You can threaten me all you want. But here's the truth. I'm not the scared little sister who stays quiet to keep the peace anymore. You took $150,000 from me. You took my car, my college fund, my wedding money. And you're going to pay it back. Every cent. See you in court. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I set down my phone, walked to my window, and looked out at Portland's lights through the rain. My family was about to declare full war. Lauren would attack my reputation. Mom would cry and manipulate. Dad would enable and deflect. They would hire expensive lawyers and try to make me look like the villain. But they had miscalculated. The old Ella would have cried herself to sleep. The old Ella would have questioned whether she was really worth fighting for. The old Ella would have considered dropping everything just to keep the peace. The new Ella made tea, reviewed her evidence one more time, and set her alarm for 6 a.m. There was work to do. They wanted a war? Fine, I was ready. The smear campaign started Saturday morning while I was still in bed. I woke to my phone buzzing relentlessly, notification after notification flooding the screen. But these weren't from Mom or Dad or Lauren. These messages came from people I hadn't heard from in months. Extended family members who suddenly had opinions about my life. Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, had sent a lengthy text. "Ella, I just heard what's happening. I'm so disappointed in you. Your mother called me crying. She says you're trying to sue your own family after everything they've done for you. How could you be so ungrateful?" Uncle Richard, my father's brother, was more direct. "Ella, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this needs to stop. Your father is a good man. He doesn't deserve this. Family doesn't do this to each other." My cousin Megan, Lauren's age and always closer to her than to me, sent the most dismissive message of all. "Heard about the lawyer thing. Yikes. Lauren is devastated. Maybe chill?" I scrolled through message after message, my stomach sinking with each one. They all carried the same theme. I was the villain. I was tearing the family apart. I was ungrateful and bitter and needed to be stopped. Lauren had activated the family network overnight. She had controlled the narrative before I even had a chance to share my side. She had painted herself as the victim and me as the aggressor, and everyone had believed her without question. Not one of them had asked for my perspective. Not one of them had wondered if maybe there was more to the story. They had simply accepted Lauren's version as truth because she was the likable one, the charming one, the sister who had always known how to work a room. I set down my phone with trembling hands. This was only the beginning. Aunt Carol called around 2 in the afternoon, and I made the mistake of answering. Maybe I thought I could explain. Maybe I hoped that if she just heard the facts, she would understand. "Ella, honey," she began in that concerned voice that wasn't really concerned at all. "I'm calling because I'm worried about you. Your mother says you've been acting erratically since the divorce. She thinks you might need help, professional help. The implication was clear. They were trying to paint me as mentally unstable." "Aunt Carol, that's not what's happening. They stole money from me. Grandpa sent $85,000 for a car and they gave it to Lauren instead." "Stole?" "Honey, your parents don't steal. They're family." I tried again, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Mom and Dad took a gift that Grandpa specifically designated for me and redirected it to Lauren. I have proof. Bank records, emails, everything. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding." She sounded exactly like my mother, that same dismissive tone. "Families share resources, that's what we do. This wasn't sharing. This was theft. For 10 years, they've been intercepting gifts Grandpa sent me." "You've always been so intense, Ella, even as a child." Her voice dripped with false sympathy. "Maybe you're misremembering things. Your grandfather is getting older. Maybe he's confused about what he sent and when." The gaslighting was so blatant, I almost laughed. My grandfather, who had run a successful trucking company for 40 years, who kept meticulous records of every financial transaction, who could recite shipping manifests from memory well into his 70s. They wanted people to believe he was confused. "Why would Patricia lie?" Aunt Carol continued. "She loves you." The call ended badly. I hung up when it became clear that nothing I said would penetrate her loyalty to her sister. She had already decided I was the problem. Any evidence I offered would simply be reframed as proof of my instability. Before I could process that conversation, my phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. My stomach dropped when I saw it. Lauren had posted a lengthy status update, and it was public, visible to everyone. "I don't usually share personal things here," her post began, "but I need support from my community right now. My sister has decided to sue our family over a misunderstanding about money. She's hired lawyers. She's threatening our elderly grandfather. She's tearing us apart." The lies kept flowing. All because she feels entitled to things that were given freely as family support. I'm heartbroken. My parents are devastated. Our grandfather is confused and being manipulated. Please keep us in your thoughts. This is the hardest thing I've ever faced. She ended with the most manipulative line of all. "I love my sister, but I don't recognize who she's become." The comments were already piling up, hundreds of them. "So sorry, Lauren, stay strong. Some people are just toxic. You're better off without her. Family should never do this, sending love. She sounds jealous, you've always been the sweet one." People I had gone to high school with were commenting their support for Lauren. Coworkers might see this post. My reputation was being shredded in real time, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The worst part was how perfectly Lauren played the victim. The tears, the vulnerability, the "I love my sister despite everything." She was the sympathetic figure. I was the villain. And anyone who didn't know the truth would believe exactly what she wanted them to believe. I wanted to comment, to defend myself, to post the evidence and let everyone see what had really happened. But Diane's voice echoed in my mind. "Don't engage publicly. Don't give them ammunition. We fight this in court, not on social media." I closed the app, but the damage was already done. Sunday was worse. I didn't leave my apartment. I couldn't face the world knowing what was being said about me online. I kept refreshing Lauren's post obsessively, watching the comments multiply, each one a small knife in my chest. The self-doubt crept in during the quiet hours. What if I was overreacting? What if this wasn't worth destroying the family over? What if I should just let it go? The old programming whispered in my ear. Be the bigger person. Keep the peace. Sacrifice yourself so everyone else can be comfortable. I pulled out the evidence and spread it across my kitchen table. The bank transfers, the text messages, the loan documents, $150,000, 10 years of systematic theft. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a family disagreement. It was documented, calculated fraud. But the world didn't know that. The world saw Lauren's tears and believed her. By Sunday evening, I was falling apart. I hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. I couldn't sleep more than a few hours at a time. My chest felt tight constantly, anxiety humming through my body like an electrical current. I sat on my floor with my back against the wall and cried. Ugly, gasping sobs that racked my entire body. The same tears I had shed in that parking lot after the confrontation, but worse now, because now I was alone against an army. My family had turned against me. The extended relatives had chosen their side. Lauren was winning the public narrative war, and I was sitting in my tiny apartment, surrounded by evidence that no one wanted to see. The knock on my door startled me so badly I almost screamed. I considered not answering. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked terrible, eyes swollen and face blotchy from crying. But something made me check the peephole. Marcus stood in my hallway, holding a paper bag and looking concerned. I opened the door slowly, too exhausted to pretend I was okay. "How do you know where I live?" He held up the bag. "Company directory has emergency contact info, including addresses. I brought Thai food, the good kind." "You didn't answer my texts today, or yesterday." I got worried. I could have sent him away. I could have insisted I was fine, closed the door, gone back to crying alone on my floor. But I was so tired of pretending, so tired of being strong. I stepped aside and let him in. We ate in my small kitchen, surrounded by the evidence folders I hadn't bothered to hide. Marcus didn't push for information. He talked about random things. A hiking trail he had discovered. A terrible movie he had watched. Normal conversation. Oxygen for my suffocating mind. Eventually, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "I'm not okay, Marcus, I know. How do you know?" "Because I've seen that look before. I've worn that look before." He told me briefly about something similar he had gone through years ago. Family betrayal, different details, but the same pain. People he thought he could trust who turned out to be strangers. He had learned the hard way that chosen family mattered more than blood. Something about his quiet understanding unlocked the floodgates. I told him everything. The dinner, the Mercedes, the bicycle, the college fund and the wedding money, Lauren's texts and Derek's testimony. 10 years of theft condensed into 30 minutes of confession. Marcus listened without interrupting. He didn't minimize or gaslight. He didn't tell me to forgive and forget. He just listened. When I finished, he asked a simple question. You have actual documentation? Bank records, texts, everything? Yes. Enough to prove all of it. And they're still calling you the villain? His verdict came without hesitation. Ella, you're not the villain. You're the person finally fighting back. They're not upset because you're wrong. They're upset because you're right. And right people with evidence are dangerous to liars. The validation I had been starving for washed over me like warm water. Someone outside the situation. Someone with no stake in the family narrative. Telling me I wasn't crazy. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, I admitted, my voice cracking. You've been strong your whole life. That's why they targeted you. But you don't have to be strong alone anymore. He reached across the table and covered my hand briefly with his. Let me help. Whatever you need. Research, moral support, someone to sit with you when it gets too heavy. You've been carrying this by yourself for months. Let someone share the weight. I wasn't used to accepting help. Wasn't used to trusting people outside my family. But my family had proven they couldn't be trusted. Maybe it was time to try something new. Okay, I said. Thank you, Marcus. That's what friends are for. He smiled, and for the first time in days, I almost smiled back. After Marcus left, Grandpa called. His voice was steadier than it had been Thursday, stronger. The crisis hadn't broken him after all. Sweetheart, I heard what's happening. The Facebook thing. My heart sank. You saw it? Your Aunt Carol called me. Tried to convince me that you're manipulating me, that I'm confused and you're taking advantage. What did you say? I could hear the steel in his voice. I said I've been running businesses and managing finances for 60 years. I said I have bank records going back decades. I said if anyone thinks I'm confused, they can review my accounting. And I said my granddaughter is the only person in this family who has told me the truth. Thank you, Grandpa. Don't thank me. I should have seen this years ago. His tone softened. Ella, don't let them make you doubt yourself. They're loud because they're scared. The truth doesn't change just because they yell louder. We have the evidence. We have each other. And we're not backing down. His certainty anchored me. Grandpa believed me. Derek believed me. Marcus believed me. Diane believed me. The people who had actually seen the evidence all knew I was telling the truth. Only the people protecting Lauren questioned my sanity. Before hanging up, Grandpa added one more thing. Derek called me tonight. He said your parents and Lauren had an emergency meeting yesterday. They're planning something. He doesn't know what yet, but he said to be ready. I texted Derek immediately after the call ended. Grandpa said you called him about a family meeting? His reply came quickly. Yeah, they met at your parents' house. I wasn't invited. Lauren came back to the hotel to get some of her things. She said they've hired their own lawyer, someone expensive. She said they're not paying anything. They're going to fight. The escalation I had expected was here. They weren't backing down. They weren't negotiating. They were hiring attorneys and preparing for war. I forwarded the texts to Diane and added a note. They're lawyering up. What should I expect? Her reply came quickly. Expected. Don't worry. We anticipated this. Their lawyer will send a response to our demand letter, probably within the next day or two. It will likely reject our demands and make counter-accusations. That's when the real fight begins. Monday morning, I was at my desk trying to focus on a client report when the email arrived. From Diane. Subject line, urgent, family's legal response received. I opened it with shaking hands. Diane had forwarded the letter from my family's attorney, a prestigious firm in downtown Portland, the kind with names like Partners and Associates and marble floors. The header alone was intimidating. Their position was exactly what Lauren had threatened. The Richardson family categorically denies all allegations of theft, fraud, or misappropriation. Any gifts from Harold Richardson were given to the family unit, not to specific individuals. Ella Richardson is pursuing a frivolous claim motivated by jealousy and post-divorce instability. The attacks got worse. Harold Richardson's mental competency regarding financial matters is questionable and may require professional evaluation. Derek Hartley's testimony is tainted by his own legal exposure and cannot be considered reliable. And the final threat. If this matter proceeds to litigation, we will pursue counterclaims for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Diane's note at the bottom was reassuring. They're playing hardball, threatening to discredit Grandpa's competency and sue you for defamation. This is standard intimidation. Don't panic. We have more evidence than they realize. Let's meet tomorrow to prepare our next move. I stared at the email until my vision blurred. My family wasn't just denying the theft. They were attacking, threatening to question my grandfather's mental fitness, threatening to sue me for telling the truth. The people who had stolen $150,000 from me were threatening to sue me. I closed my laptop and took a slow breath. The fear was there, sharp and real. But underneath it, something harder was forming. Something that refused to break. They wanted a war. Fine. I would give them one they would never forget. The morning of the mediation arrived cold and gray, typical November weather in Portland. I woke at 5 because sleep was impossible anyway, and spent 2 hours preparing in ways that had nothing to do with evidence or legal strategy. I showered and dressed in my most professional outfit, a charcoal suit with a white blouse that made me look serious and competent. I pulled my hair back from my face and applied minimal makeup. This wasn't a day for sympathy. This was a day for strength. The evidence folder sat on my kitchen table where it had lived for weeks. Every document organized, every screenshot printed, every bank statement highlighted and annotated. 2 weeks of preparation compressed into one thick manila folder that would determine my future. I picked it up and headed for the courthouse. Multnomah County Courthouse was an imposing stone building in downtown Portland, all columns and steps and architectural weight designed to convey authority. I had never been inside before, never needed to, never imagined I would be suing my own family in a place like this. Diane was waiting on the steps when I arrived, briefcase in hand, looking sharp and ready for battle. Her confidence steadied my racing heart. "How are you feeling?" she asked, terrified, determined, both. "Good." She smiled slightly. "That's exactly right." Grandpa arrived moments later in a hired town car, insisting that a day this important required proper transportation. He emerged slowly, leaning on his cane more heavily than usual, but his eyes were clear and his jaw was set. He wore his best suit, the one Grandma had bought him 30 years ago for their anniversary. It still fit perfectly. "Let's finish this," he said simply. Derek arrived separately, parking blocks away and approaching through a side entrance. He looked terrible, unshaven and exhausted. But he had come. He had chosen truth over his marriage, honesty over comfort. Whatever else happened today, that meant something. We entered the courthouse together, passed through security, and climbed the stairs to Mediation Room 3B on the second floor. And that's when I saw them. Mom, Dad, and Lauren were entering through a side door with their attorney, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit who radiated the particular confidence of someone who charged $500 an hour. Lauren looked up, and our eyes met across the lobby. No tears this time, no pleading or pretense, just cold calculation meeting cold determination. Two sisters who had become enemies, preparing to fight over the wreckage of a family that had never been what it seemed. The mediation room was large and institutional, with a mahogany conference table long enough for 12 people and windows overlooking the courthouse square. Water pitchers sat precisely arranged on the table, crystal glasses catching the gray morning light. The mediator's chair waited empty at the head of the table. We took our positions like soldiers claiming territory. My side, Diane, me, Grandpa. Derek sat slightly apart, a witness rather than a party. Their side, the expensive attorney, Mom clutching tissues, Dad staring at the table, Lauren sitting perfectly still with her hands folded. Nobody spoke. The tension was thick enough to choke on. The mediator entered precisely on time. Judge Patricia Okonkwo, retired, appointed by the court to oversee this disaster. She was an African-American woman in her 60s with silver locks and reading glasses, radiating the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades sorting through human conflict. "Good morning, everyone," she said, settling into her chair. "Let's begin." Diane presented our case first. She was methodical and devastating, walking through every piece of evidence I had gathered over the past weeks. "Your Honor, my client Ella Richardson is seeking recovery of $150,500 in documented gifts that were systematically diverted from her over a period of 10 years. These weren't family misunderstandings. These were calculated, premeditated thefts." She laid out the exhibits one by one. The Mercedes, Grandpa's email requesting the car purchase, the bank transfer of $85,000, the DMV registration showing the vehicle in Lauren's name, the bill of sale proving they had sold it, the loan documents showing they had borrowed $30,000 against it before the sale. The college fund, a check for $20,000 that I never saw a penny of while I worked 2 jobs and accumulated $40,000 in student loans. The wedding money, $15,000 sent, $3,000 received, while Lauren threw a lavish celebration at a country club. And the pattern of communication, years of text messages between Lauren and Mom, planning the diversions, celebrating their success, discussing how to keep me ignorant. The room shifted as Diane spoke. Judge Okonkwo's expression grew increasingly grave. The family's attorney was scribbling furiously, his confidence visibly wavering. Mom had started crying silently, dabbing at her eyes with tissue after tissue. Dad's face had gone gray. Diane concluded with words that echoed through the room. "Your Honor, we have bank records. We have communications. We have a sworn witness willing to testify. This isn't speculation. This is documented financial fraud against my client. We are requesting full restitution of $150,500 plus interest." Judge Okonkwo turned to the family's side of the table. "Mr. Webb, your client's response?" The attorney cleared his throat, preparing to deliver the counterattack they had planned. But before he could speak, something unexpected happened. Dad's chair scraped back against the floor as he stood abruptly. "I need to say something." His attorney grabbed his arm. "Robert, I advise against speaking without consultation." Dad shook him off. "I don't care what you advise. I'm done." Mom's voice rose in panic. "Robert, sit down." "Patricia, no. Not this time." Dad met her eyes across the table, and something passed between them, decades of marriage compressed into a single look. Something has broken inside him. "I'm done lying." He turned to face the room, and when he spoke, his voice was tired and defeated and finally, devastatingly honest. "Everything Ella's lawyer said is true." The words fell like bombs. Mom sobbed louder. Lauren's composure shattered. The family's attorney dropped his pen. "The money for the Mercedes was meant for Ella," Dad continued. "We gave it to Lauren. The college fund was meant for Ella. Patricia redirected it. The wedding money was meant for Ella. I cashed the check myself and kept most of it." He took a shaky breath. "We told ourselves it was for the family, that we were just helping the daughter who needed it more. But we were lying. We were lying to my father. We were lying to Ella. We were lying to ourselves." Then he turned and looked directly at me, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Raw, unguarded shame. "I watched you struggle, Ella. I watched you work 2 jobs and ride that bicycle and live in that tiny apartment. And I knew we had taken your money. I told myself you were strong, that you'd be fine without it. But that was just an excuse, a coward's excuse for robbing my own daughter." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Ella. I'm so sorry." Lauren erupted from her seat. "Dad, stop! What are you doing? You're destroying us." "I'm telling the truth, Lauren. Something this family should have done years ago. You're ruining everything." Dad's voice hardened. "No, we ruined everything. when we decided Ella didn't matter. Mom was sobbing openly now, clutching the table edge like she might collapse. "Robert, please, we can still fix this. We can still make it right." "There's nothing to fix, Patricia. There's only what we owe." Judge Okonkwo held up her hand for silence. The room stilled instantly. She looked at the family's attorney with an expression that left no room for argument. "Mr. Webb, given your client's statement, do you wish to continue contesting these claims?" The attorney conferred quickly with Mom and Lauren. I could hear the frantic whispers, the panic in their voices. Lauren was hissing at her mother to do something, anything. Mom just kept crying and shaking her head. Finally, Webb stood, looking like a man whose entire strategy had just collapsed. "Your Honor, in light of these new developments, my clients request a brief recess to discuss revised positions." "Denied." Judge Okonkwo's voice was firm. "We're settling this today." The family's defense was in ruins. Dad had physically separated himself from their side, moving to an empty chair in the corner of the room. He was no longer part of their team. The united front they had presented for weeks had shattered publicly and irreparably. Lauren made one last, desperate attempt. "This is insane, Ella. We're sisters. How can you do this to your own family?" "I'm not doing anything," I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "I'm just stopping what you've been doing for 10 years. I was desperate. You don't understand what it's like to be me. I understand perfectly. You decided I didn't deserve what was mine. You decided that every time. And Mom and Dad helped you." Mom reached toward me with trembling hands. "Sweetheart, please, we love you." I looked at her. This woman who had raised me, who had kissed my scraped knees and made my birthday cakes and told me she was proud of me. This woman who had also stolen from me for a decade, who had watched me struggle and done nothing, who had lied to my grandfather and used his love as a personal ATM. "You have a strange way of showing it," I said. Judge Okonkwo brought us back to the matter at hand. "Given the evidence and Mr. Richardson's statement, I strongly recommend your clients accept a settlement. Otherwise, this will proceed to trial. And based on what I've seen today, the outcome will not be in your favor." Diane presented the terms. Full restitution, $150,500. Interest at 6% over the theft period, additional $27,090. Total, $177,590. Payment plan acceptable, monthly installments over 3 years. If terms violated, immediate civil judgment, plus referral for criminal fraud charges. The family's attorney conferred with Mom and Lauren in heated whispers. "We don't have that kind of money," Lauren protested. "We'll have to sell the house." Webb's response was quiet but firm. "You don't have a choice." Derek spoke for the first time since entering the room. "The $30,000 loan, that's mine and Lauren's responsibility. I'll pay my half. Separately. I'm not asking Ella to cover my mistakes." The negotiations continued for another hour, hammering out details and responsibilities. In the end, the agreement looked like this. Patricia and Robert would pay $117,590, covering the Mercedes' original gift and historical theft. Lauren would pay $30,000, plus her portion of interest for the loan she had initiated. Derek would pay $15,000 for his half of the loan. Papers were pushed across the table. Mom signed with trembling hands, mascara streaking her cheeks. Lauren signed without looking up. Dad signed with something that looked almost like relief. It was done. $177,590, acknowledged owed to me. Legal, documented, enforceable. 10 years of theft finally accounted for. The room emptied slowly afterward. Judge Okonkwo thanked everyone and departed. The family's attorney fled quickly, eager to escape the disaster. Derek slipped out through a side door, heading back to the hotel where he had been hiding from Lauren for weeks. Mom, Dad, and Lauren huddled in the corner, their alliance fractured beyond repair. Grandpa found me by the windows. His eyes were wet but clear. "You did it, sweetheart. You stood up for yourself." "We did it, Grandpa," No, this was you. I just provided the evidence. He took my hands in his weathered ones. You finally claimed what was yours. Diane gathered her files with professional satisfaction. Textbook case, Ella. They had no defense once the father confessed. I'll have the formal agreement drafted by end of week. I nodded, waiting to feel triumphant, waiting to feel victorious. Instead, I felt empty, not happy, not sad, just done. As I turned to leave, Mom stepped into my path. Her face was ravaged by tears, makeup destroyed, the careful composure she had maintained for decades completely shattered. Ella, please. I waited. I know you hate us. But please, is there any chance you can ever forgive us? I looked at my mother, the woman who had raised me, fed me, tucked me in at night, who had also stolen $150,000 from me, who had watched me suffer and chose her other daughter every single time. I don't hate you, Mom. Her face lifted with desperate hope. But I don't trust you, and I don't know if I ever will again. Forgiveness isn't something I can promise right now. Maybe someday, maybe never, but today I need you to leave me alone. I walked past her, down the courthouse hallway, Grandpa beside me. The weight on my shoulders was lighter, but the grief remained. I had won. I had gotten justice. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a funeral for the family I thought I had. Outside, the sun had broken through Portland's gray clouds. I stood on the courthouse steps, breathing fresh air, trying to feel something other than exhausted numbness. My phone buzzed. Marcus. How did it go? I typed back. We won. They're paying everything. His reply came immediately. That's amazing. How do you feel? I stared at the question for a long moment, searching for the right words. Finally, I typed the only honest answer. I don't know yet. I'll let you know when I figure it out. I pocketed the phone, took Grandpa's arm, and walked into the sunlight, leaving the courthouse and the family I once knew behind me. The notification arrived on a Saturday morning while I was making coffee. 2 weeks had passed since the mediation, 2 weeks of strange quiet after months of chaos. I was standing in my tiny kitchen, still in my robe, when my phone buzzed with an alert from my bank. Deposit received. Amount $4,932.78. Sender, Richardson Family Trust. Memo. Settlement payment, 1 of 36. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. The first installment of $177,590. They were actually paying. After everything, after the lies and the threats and the smear campaign, they were honoring the agreement. It was real. It was happening. I had expected to feel triumphant when this moment came, vindicated, victorious. Instead, I felt something more complicated. Relief, certainly, validation that the fight had been worth it. But also grief I hadn't anticipated. Every payment would be a reminder of what my family had done. Every deposit a monument to betrayal. I set down my coffee and sat at my kitchen table, the same table that had been covered with evidence folders for weeks. The folders were filed away now, stored in a closet where I didn't have to look at them every day. The surface was clean and empty, waiting for a new chapter. My phone buzzed again. A text from Grandpa. Did you receive it? I typed back slowly. Yes. It's real. His reply came immediately. It was always real. They just finally admitted it. I drove to Lake Oswego later that morning to see him in person. The settlement felt too significant for a phone conversation. The road was familiar now, every turn carrying memories both old and new. The coffee shop where Grandpa used to buy me hot chocolate. The park where he taught me to ride a bike. The neighborhood where his house sat waiting, unchanged through all the chaos. But when I pulled into his driveway, something felt different. The porch light was off. The newspapers were collected. The garden looked tended. Grandpa emerged onto the porch before I even parked, and he looked better than he had in weeks. Color in his cheeks, steadiness in his step, something had shifted. He pulled me into a hug the moment I reached him. How does it feel, sweetheart? Complicated. He released me and studied my face with knowing eyes. It should feel complicated. This was never just about money. Inside, we sat in his living room with fresh tea, and I told him about the deposit notification, about seeing that number in my account and feeling everything and nothing at the same time. About the strange emptiness that had settled over me since the mediation. Grandpa listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, letting me work through my own thoughts out loud. When I finished, he set down his teacup. "There's something I need to tell you. Your father called me yesterday. I went very still." "What did he say?" "He apologized. To me, specifically. For using my money, for lying, for all of it. He asked if I could ever forgive him." The news hit me strangely. Dad had broken from the family at the mediation. He had confessed everything publicly, destroying whatever alliance remained between him and Mom and Lauren. But I hadn't known he was reaching out to Grandpa separately. "I told him forgiveness would take time," Grandpa continued. "I told him actions matter more than words now." He said he understood. He paused, watching my reaction carefully. "He also asked about you, wanted to know if you'd be willing to talk to him, separately from your mother and Lauren, just the two of you." The request hung in the air between us. Dad wanted to rebuild, not as part of the family unit that had wronged me, but as an individual acknowledging his individual guilt. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," I said slowly. "You don't have to decide now, but I thought you should know he's trying. He broke something at that mediation, Ella. He knows that. The question is whether he's willing to help rebuild it." I considered what Grandpa was telling me. Dad had lost his marriage because he chose truth. He and Mom were separated now, heading toward divorce. He was living alone for the first time in 35 years, in a small apartment in Beaverton, facing the consequences of decades of complicity. It didn't erase what he had done, but it meant something. "I'll think about it," I told Grandpa. "More than think, maybe." He smiled slightly. "That's all I ask." After we finished our tea, I asked about the one person who hadn't contacted me since the mediation. Lauren. Complete silence for 2 weeks. No texts, no calls, no social media attacks. The smear campaign had stopped as suddenly as it began. Grandpa told me what he knew, which wasn't much. Derek had filed for divorce and moved out of state to stay with family. Lauren had moved back in with Mom temporarily while Dad was in his apartment. According to what Derek had heard through mutual friends, she was not doing well. But the details were vague, and I found I didn't want to know more. The strange thing was, I didn't miss her. I had expected to grieve the relationship, to mourn the sister I thought I had. Instead, I felt mostly nothing. As if Lauren had become a stranger long before I realized it. As if the fragile little sister had always been a performance I was the last to see through. I was getting ready to leave when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The preview made my breath catch. "Ella, it's Lauren. Please don't delete this. I need to tell you something." I opened the message with a mix of dread and curiosity. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm not making excuses. There aren't any. I just need you to know that I understand now. What I did wasn't just about money. It was about seeing you as less than me, thinking I deserved more because I needed more. That was wrong, not just morally wrong, fundamentally wrong." The message continued. "You were never less. You were always more. More capable, more resilient, more real. And I punished you for it. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I became this person. I don't expect you to care. I don't expect anything. I just needed to say it. Even if you never respond. I'm sorry, Ella, for all of it." I read the message 3 times, searching for manipulation, looking for the angle. But it didn't sound like Lauren's usual performances. It sounded like honesty, raw and uncomfortable and possibly genuine. I didn't respond. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I didn't delete it either. I saved it as evidence of something I hadn't expected. The possibility that Lauren might actually be capable of change. Later that afternoon, I met Marcus at our usual coffee shop. It had become a routine over the past weeks, these conversations that had nothing to do with marketing metrics or office politics, a space where I could process everything out loud with someone who listened without judgment. I told him about the first payment, about Grandpa's call with Dad, about Lauren's unexpected message. He listened the way he always did, present and patient, asking questions only when they would help me think more clearly. When I finished, he set down his coffee and studied me. "That's a lot for one day. It's been a lot for 1 year. How are you actually feeling? Not how you think you should feel. How you actually feel." I considered the question seriously, digging beneath the surface of my own emotions. Lighter, I admitted, but also sad. Is that weird? Not weird at all. You won. But winning meant losing your family, or at least the family you thought you had. It makes sense to grieve that, even while celebrating the justice. The insight clicked into place. I had been waiting to feel purely happy, waiting for the victory to be uncomplicated. But grief and relief could coexist. I could be glad I fought and sad about what I lost at the same time. "You know what I've noticed about you?" Marcus said. "What?" "You're different now, stronger, but also softer somehow." "Softer?" "Less guarded, more willing to let people in. The walls came down when you started fighting for yourself." He reached across the table and covered my hand with his briefly. "I'm proud of you, Ella. Whatever you decide about your family, forgiveness or boundaries or something in between, you've already done the hardest part." Something warm bloomed in my chest at his words. Not the desperate gratitude I had felt months ago when anyone showed me kindness. Something calmer, more certain, the recognition that I had found someone worthy of trust. That evening, Grandpa asked me to come by for dinner. He said he had something to give me, something that couldn't wait. His voice on the phone had carried a weight that made me curious and slightly nervous. The house felt different when I arrived, warmer than it had been during the crisis. Grandpa had been cooking again, the smell of roast chicken filling the kitchen. The newspapers were always collected now. The garden was recovering. He was healing too. After we ate, he led me to the living room and pulled out an envelope. "This isn't about the settlement," he said. "This is something separate, something I should have done years ago." He opened the envelope and removed something small and glittering. A gold necklace with a delicate sapphire pendant. Grandma's birthstone. I recognized it immediately from photographs. She had worn it in almost every picture I had ever seen of her. "When your grandmother died," Grandpa explained, "she left instructions about her jewelry. Most went to your mother. But this was specifically for you. She wanted you to have it when you turned 30. My 30th birthday had been 3 years ago. I had received a card from my parents and nothing else." "Your mother was supposed to give this to you," Grandpa continued. "She told me she did. But after everything that happened, I asked her directly. She admitted she gave it to Lauren instead, said Lauren appreciated jewelry more. Another theft, another redirection, but also a recovery, a restoration, something of Grandma's finally in my hands." I held the necklace carefully, the sapphire catching the lamplight. It was beautiful, delicate and precious and meant for me. "Your grandmother loved you, Ella. She saw you." Grandpa's voice was thick with emotion. "She told me once that girl is going to fight for herself someday." She was right. I clasped the necklace around my neck, feeling the cool weight of the pendant against my skin. A piece of the woman who had believed in me before anyone else. A connection that had been stolen and was now returned. I drove home as the sun set, touching the sapphire at my throat every few minutes to remind myself it was real. My tiny apartment waited for me, 400 square feet that had been my survival shelter for almost a year. But as I walked through the door, I saw it with new eyes. This place had served its purpose. It had been affordable when affordable was all that mattered, but I didn't have to settle anymore. The settlement payments would continue for 3 years. I could afford something bigger, something chosen instead of survived. I looked at the bicycle leaning against the wall by the door, the rusty 10-speed that had started everything. For months I had been unable to touch it, unable to throw it away. It was evidence, a reminder, a wound. But I didn't need reminders anymore. I had the legal documents, I had the settlement agreement, I had the truth, acknowledged and compensated. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I would donate the bicycle to someone who actually needed it. I would start looking for a new apartment. I would begin building a life that was chosen, not endured. My phone buzzed with one more message. From Dad this time. Direct, not through Grandpa. Ella, I know I don't deserve it, but I'd like to see you. Just to talk. Coffee or a walk, whatever you're comfortable with. Whenever you're ready. If you're ever ready. I'll wait. I read it twice. No pressure, no demands, no manipulation, just a father asking for a chance. The father who had broken ranks and told the truth. Who had apologized publicly and was now paying the price privately. I didn't respond tonight, but I didn't delete it. I saved it next to Lauren's message. 2 olive branches from the wreckage of my family. Before bed, I touched the sapphire pendant one more time. Grandma's necklace, Grandpa's belief, my own strength. Maybe forgiveness was possible. Someday. Maybe some relationships could be rebuilt on honest foundations instead of lies. But first, I needed to build myself. A new home, a new life, a new story. One where I wasn't the forgotten daughter. One where I was the woman who refused to be forgotten. I turned off the light and lay in the darkness, thinking about tomorrow. Apartment hunting, bicycle donation, maybe even car shopping, something modest, but mine. The future wasn't scary anymore, it was open, and for the first time in 30 years, it belonged entirely to me. 3 months had passed since the mediation, and I woke on a February Saturday to sunlight streaming through tall windows I had chosen myself. My new apartment in Portland's Pearl District was nothing like the cramped studio I had survived in for almost a year. 1,100 square feet of space with exposed brick walls and a kitchen large enough to actually cook in. 2 bedrooms, one of which I had converted into a home office. Art on the walls, prints I had loved for years, but never been able to frame properly. Furniture I had selected, not salvaged from thrift stores out of necessity. The evidence folders were gone from my kitchen table, filed away in a closet no longer needed for daily reference. The surface held only a coffee maker and a small vase of flowers I had bought myself the week before. Just because I could. Just because I deserved something beautiful. I made coffee and stood at my window, looking out over the city as it woke beneath a pale winter sky. February in Portland meant the world was still gray, but there were hints of spring coming. Crocuses pushing through the soil in the park across the street. Days getting incrementally longer, the heaviness of winter beginning to lift. The bicycle was gone. I had donated it to a homeless shelter 2 months ago, watching them wheel it away with a sense of relief I hadn't expected. That chapter was closed. The rusty 10-speed that had carried me through months of struggle, the decoy gift that had hidden a theft of $85,000, was now serving someone who actually needed it. I touched the sapphire pendant at my throat, as I did every morning now. Grandma's necklace, finally where it belonged. A connection to love that had never been stolen, just delayed. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. 11 a.m., car pickup. I smiled at the notification and went to get dressed. The dealership was not Mercedes. I had considered it briefly, then decided against. Too many associations, too much baggage. Instead, I had chosen Honda. Practical, reliable. A car I had researched and selected entirely on my own terms. The salesman, young and eager and probably working on commission, tried to upsell me to a luxury package with leather seats and a premium sound system. I declined with a smile that felt foreign on my face. I know exactly what I need, I told him, and I meant it. The Honda Accord was deep blue, current year model, 4 doors with excellent safety ratings. Not flashy, not a statement piece, just a solid, dependable vehicle that would take me where I needed to go. I signed my name on the title and felt something shift in my chest. Ella Richardson. No intermediaries, no family trust, No one else's name, just mine. The keys were cold metal warming in my palm as I walked to the car. I remembered the dinner that had started everything, the bicycle, Grandpa's confusion, the revelation that had shattered my world. Now I was driving off a lot in a car I had chosen, bought with money I had fought for, going wherever I wanted. Tears pricked my eyes as I adjusted the mirrors. Not from sadness, from the overwhelming rightness of it all. I drove to Lake Oswego with the windows cracked despite the February chill, letting cold air fill my lungs. Grandpa wanted to see the car. He wanted to celebrate this moment, and I wanted him to be my first passenger. He was waiting on the porch when I pulled into his driveway, leaning on his cane but grinning like a child on Christmas morning. He walked around the car slowly, inspecting every detail, running his weathered hand along the hood. "Blue," he said. "Your grandmother's favorite color." "I know." He settled into the passenger seat with a contented sigh, and we drove around Lake Oswego together, windows still cracked, February sunlight pale but warming. He pointed out landmarks from his life. The park where he had proposed to Grandma 60 years ago. The hospital where my father had been born. The coffee shop where they used to meet for lunch every Wednesday until she got too sick. "How does it feel?" he asked as I navigated familiar streets. "Like freedom. Like I'm finally moving forward instead of just surviving. That's exactly what it should feel like." He patted my arm with a hand that shook slightly but held warmth and certainty. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart. So proud." We talked about the settlement over lunch at his kitchen table. 5 payments had arrived so far, all on time, totaling almost $25,000. At this rate, full restitution would be complete in under 3 years. "They were keeping their word," I said. Grandpa nodded slowly. "It's the minimum they can do. But yes, it's something." He told me about Dad's visits. They had been seeing each other weekly since the mediation, sitting on the porch and talking about everything and nothing. Mostly Dad apologized. Sometimes they just drank coffee and watched birds. "He's trying," Grandpa said, "really trying. I know, he's been texting me, asking if we can meet." "And will you?" I hesitated, the familiar conflict churning in my stomach. Dad had lost so much because he chose truth at the mediation. His marriage was effectively over. He was living alone for the first time in decades. He had broken from Mom and Lauren to stand with honesty, and that had cost him everything. It didn't erase 10 years of watching me struggle while he held the solution, but it meant something. "I think so," I said finally. "Soon, maybe." Grandpa smiled. "That's more than I expected." As I was leaving, he mentioned something that made me pause. "Your father isn't the only one who wants to see you. Marcus called me yesterday. Asked how you were doing." "Marcus called you?" He winked. "He seems like a good man." "Don't let him wait too long." I met Marcus at our usual coffee shop that afternoon, the small independent place that had become our neutral ground over the past months. We ordered our usual drinks and settled into our usual booth, but something felt different today. There was an electricity I hadn't noticed before, or maybe hadn't been ready to feel. He noticed the car immediately. "You drove here?" "I did." "Want to see it after?" "Absolutely. That's a big deal, Ella. It is. It really is." We talked about ordinary things for a while. Work updates, weekend plans, a hiking trail he wanted to explore when the weather warmed. Normal conversation, normal life. The gift of ordinary. Then Marcus set down his coffee and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I have a confession." "A confession?" "I called your grandfather yesterday." I kept my face neutral. "I heard. I wanted his blessing." "His blessing for what?" He took a breath, and something in his eyes shifted from nervous to determined. "To ask you to dinner. We get dinner all the time. Not like this. Not as more than friends." The words hung in the air between us, charged with possibility. "I've been waiting," he continued, "giving you space, letting you heal. But I don't want to wait anymore. Ella Richardson, will you go on a real date with me?" My heart didn't race with anxiety. It swelled with something warmer, steadier. This man had seen me at my lowest. He had listened without judging, supported without expecting anything in return. He wasn't family, and maybe that was exactly why I trusted him. "Yes," I said. Simple and clear, no hesitation. His smile could have lit the whole coffee shop. "Friday, 7 o'clock, I'll pick you up." "You know where I live?" "I do. Nice neighborhood, by the way." We both laughed, and something new began. As we walked to the parking lot, my phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source. Mom, her first contact since the mediation. I stopped walking and stared at the screen. Ella. I know I have no right to ask for anything. I know what I did was unforgivable. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking if you'd be willing to talk someday. Not today, not tomorrow, whenever you're ready. If you're ever ready. I miss you. I miss my daughter. I know I don't deserve to, but I do. I read the message twice. It sounded different from Lauren's apology, vaguer somehow. No acknowledgement of specific wrongs. No mention of the decade of theft. Just, I miss you and I know what I did. Safe words that admitted guilt without details. I didn't delete it, but I didn't respond either. Mom had been the enabler, the one who executed Lauren's requests year after year, who lied to Grandpa's face, who watched me struggle and shrugged. I wasn't ready for that conversation. Maybe I never would be. Marcus waited patiently by my car, not asking questions, just being present. I put my phone away. "Everything okay?" "No, but I will be." He nodded and kissed my cheek, light and respectful and full of promise. "Friday," he said. "Friday." I watched him drive away, then sat in my new car and scrolled to Dad's last text, the one I still hadn't answered. Before I could overthink it, I typed a reply. "Coffee this weekend? Just us. Let me know when you're free." Sunday morning, I met my father at a coffee shop neither of us had ever been to. Neutral territory. No memories, no associations. Just two people trying to find common ground in the wreckage. He looked older than I remembered. Thinner. The separation had taken its toll, but his eyes were clearer than they had been at the mediation. Less shame, more quiet determination. "Thank you for coming," he said as we sat across from each other. "I didn't expect you to say yes, I almost didn't." "I know." The conversation that followed wasn't easy, it wasn't comfortable. But it was honest in a way we had never been. He didn't make excuses or blame Mom or Lauren. He took full responsibility for his part in what had happened. "I knew it was wrong," he told me. "Every time. I knew. But it was easier to go along than to fight. Your mother and I became something I don't recognize. And Lauren, I failed her too by letting her become this person. But mostly I failed you. By pretending you didn't need what you needed. I can't forgive you yet," I said. "I'm not asking you to. But I can try to understand. Maybe. That's more than I deserve." We finished our coffee and he asked if he could call sometimes. I said yes, within limits. We weren't healed, but we were talking. And that was the first step. That evening, I stood at my apartment window and watched the sun set over Portland. The city lights began to twinkle below, and I took stock of everything that had changed. New apartment, new car, a date with Marcus on Friday, first conversation with Dad, a boundary with Mom that felt right instead of cruel, Grandpa healthy and happy and proud, settlement payments arriving like clockwork. I touched Grandma's sapphire pendant and thought about the journey that had brought me here. From thanking my grandfather for a bicycle to claiming $177,000 that had always been mine. From being the strong one who got overlooked to being the woman who refused to be erased. I had lost a sister. Maybe forever. Maybe not. I had lost the mother I thought I had. I had lost the family I believed in. But I had found something more important. I had found myself. I used to believe that being strong meant suffering in silence. That not needing anyone was a virtue. That being the easy daughter made me a good person. I was wrong. Strength isn't about carrying weight no one asked you to carry. It's about setting it down. It's about saying this isn't fair when it isn't. It's about claiming what belongs to you, even when your own family tells you that you don't deserve it. They called me the strong one. They used it as an excuse to overlook me, to steal from me, to choose someone else every single time. But they were right about one thing. I am strong. Strong enough to uncover the truth, strong enough to fight for justice, strong enough to rebuild my life from nothing, and strong enough to walk away from people who only loved me when I made their lives easier. If you're listening to this story and something resonates, if you've ever been the one who was overlooked, the one who was told you could handle it, the one whose needs were invisible, I want you to know something. You deserve more than being strong for everyone else. Sometimes being strong means being strong for yourself. It means drawing lines, demanding respect, walking away from people who only take. That's not selfish. That's survival. That's self-worth. That's justice. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment telling me about a time you stood up for yourself, or a time you wished you had. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you want more stories like this, stories about resilience and family secrets and ordinary people finding the courage to claim what's theirs, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter. Because everyone has a story worth telling. Maybe next time it'll be yours. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, you are worth fighting for. I touched the sapphire pendant one last time, turned off the living room light, and walked toward my bedroom, toward rest, toward tomorrow, toward whatever came next. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't afraid of the future. I was ready for it. This story is fictionalized for dramatic effect.